Bam! What's up, guys? We are live. So today is going to be the part 2 of the Roe versus Wade debate. So if you guys missed it, we had a good one yesterday. It was very spontaneous. I was supposed to debate a TikTok SJW, and then they flaked. And then since Roe versus Wade was like a hot topic issue since it was overturned yesterday, I was like, oh, let's just debate about this. And there was a whole bunch of people who were down. That was the biggest debate turnout I've ever had in terms of at least people who want to debate me, not in terms of live viewers, but that was still pretty good. So I was like, okay, let's do a part 2 because there's a whole bunch of people who I didn't get a chance to, go through and debate. So yeah, so this is gonna be the part 2. We're gonna be talking about Roe versus Wade, abortion in general. Again, typically I don't like to get into politics on this channel because I think politics are pretty dumb and a massive waste of time. However, this is somewhat relevant to game indirectly, and I think it's a trending issue. So I think it'll be interesting. But this will probably be the last Roe versus Wade debate I do, and probably the last political debate I do, at least for a while. So speak now, forever hold your peace. So yeah, so I think there's going to be a whole bunch of people. We are going to make some rules this time. The only rule really actually is I think we're going to do like a time limit per person unless the debate is getting real juicy. So we'll do maybe like 25, 30 minutes per person unless like the debate is getting really, really juicy and we need more time. But I do want to get through more people because the last one we just didn't get a chance to get through enough people. Okay, so if you want to debate me, let me know in the comments, right? If you disagree with me, so let me clarify my position for those who were not there yesterday. My position is that overturning Roe versus Wade was a mistake for a variety of reasons, for economic reasons, because I think that having a whole bunch of unwanted children creates more crime, creates a burden on the state. Also, from a freedom perspective, I think it kind of sucks for a woman to have to like bring to term a child that she doesn't want to have. I think it can suck for the guy to have to pay 18 years of child support. So I have a whole host of arguments why I think it was a mistake. So yeah, that's kind of like my argument. Okay, let's answer some questions, and then I'm going to drop the link. Is your channel now political? No, absolutely not. It's definitely not. But I do think this issue has somewhat of a bearing to game. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen it. There's been a lot of chicks who are saying, oh, I'm going to go celibate now. And I do think a lot of them are bullshitting. But I do think this is going to very indirectly affect the dating marketplace. So I think it's somewhat related. So yeah, that's why, at least that's how I'm justifying it. But ultimately, I think it's just good content and it's entertaining. Okay, so I posted the link. But please, only come on if you legitimately disagree with me on this issue. Don't just come on because you want to ask me some questions, which I appreciate, but I want to keep this on track. Okay. Alex, want to thank you for your work on the channel. I got a girlfriend a few months ago. Thanks for your content. Nice, man. I'm glad to hear. I had a fun in our debate yesterday. Looking forward to seeing what someone brings to the table today. Sounds good. Yep. Alex, if something bothers you, you should keep it inside or should you let it out? It really depends on what it is, I guess. In Canada, you can abort a 9-pound baby. Do you agree with that? What does that mean? Like a baby who's already who's been born, like a 9-month baby? I don't know what that means exactly. So what's the term limit? Okay, we got one person, so let's add them to the stream. Hello.
Hey, what's up, Alex?
Hey, how's it going? Your audio is kind of crackling. Could you turn down the gain, please?
Is it better now? I was inside a restaurant.
It's still pretty intense. I don't know if you have a way of turning it down a little bit more.
Okay. Is it good here?
Are you using your phone or are you doing a what are you using for the? Are you using computer, phone?
I'm using my phone and some headphones.
Okay, I think we'll be okay. So let's get into it, man. Yeah. So I'm assuming you disagree with me on Roe versus Wade.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, cool. So yeah. So what's your? I guess I'll let you kick it off. What do you disagree with me on?
Okay, so I think that it is completely wrong to ever kill an innocent baby inside the womb. So I would kick it off to you. When do you think killing a baby inside the womb would be justified?
So there's two ways to look at it from an personal ethical perspective and a legal perspective. So my goal is not to convince people that they should all get behind abortion. I'm looking at it from a legal perspective. So, for example, if I got a chick knocked up, I would probably feel some type of way about, telling her to abort the baby, right? But that doesn't mean, I also think that lying is messed up. Lying should be legal. So I think first we need to separate those two things. In terms of your question, where do I think that the line should be? It depends on what studies we go off. But I think the key part of humanity is being sentient, right? Is sentience? Would you agree with that?
I don't even know what a sentient is.
It's the ability to perceive or feel things.
I guess it depends. Are you asking would I consider that where human life begins?
Yeah, where do you consider human life begins?
I would say it begins right at conception because there are different stages to human life. So obviously, a baby inside the womb that's 1 year old, assuming you don't kill it, will grow to be a baby that's 60 years old. So.
Yeah, okay. But so do you think the morning after pill should be illegal?
No, because as far as I'm aware, the morning after pill does not kill a baby. It simply prevents the sperm from entering the egg. And I do not consider an egg by itself to be a baby. I do not consider a sperm by itself to be a baby. So if the morning after pill is simply preventing the sperm from entering the egg and creating a baby in the first place, I have no problem with the morning after pill. Now, if you're talking about when the sperm has already entered the egg and already created a baby, and then you're going to kill that baby, I have a massive problem with that.
Well, I think the term baby is a little misleading because at that point it's a fetus, right?
Or accurate.
Well, I mean, again, depends on where we go off. Are we going off a heartbeat when the baby feels the heartbeat? Because that's usually about 2 months in at when the baby has the heartbeat. But I'm going off sentience, which is, again, the ability to perceive or feel things. And that happens, according to most studies, between 4 and 5 months.
So by that logic, it's okay to kill a baby as long as they can't feel it?
No, I think there needs to be some reasonable stopping point. But I think it should be up to a woman should have the right to make that decision up until a certain point. Past a certain point, I think it just becomes a little shamey that she hasn't done it yet. So yeah, I don't think there should be a blanket legal protection for abortion at any point. I think the way Roe versus Wade had it was there was protection up until 3 months. And I think that's a reasonable stopping point. So I'm cool with leaving it there.
I would disagree. But, I mean, I don't know. It's a weird way to look at it because, I'm sure a lot of people would say better to do it at 1 month than 9 months. In a way, yes, I suppose. Because perhaps a 9-year-old would feel the pain a lot more than or a 9-month-old than a 1 month. So I guess by a certain way, if you had to choose the lesser of two evils, I guess in that way, maybe. But at the end of the day, I mean, if you're killing a baby at 9 months or 1 month, I mean, you're still killing the baby. So I don't see what difference it makes.
Do you agree that there's different levels of life and consciousness?
Can you be a little more specific?
Would you say in terms of consciousness, a 2-year-old baby has the same level of consciousness as a 1-month fetus?
Oh, no, of course not.
Okay, so there's different levels of consciousness, right? So I guess like what you're saying for you want to draw that line like the second that the sperm connects with the egg. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, because the second the sperm connects with the egg, conception, then you have a baby. Yeah, the baby might be 1 minute old, it might be 1 day old, but it's still a baby. And if you leave it alone, it's going to grow into a month-old, 3-month-old, 9-month-old.
Well, you have a potential baby, right? That baby, if you take it outside the womb, it will die, right? So at that point, it's not actually a baby yet; it's a potential baby. It's a fetus.
No, that's a horrible argument, because if a mother gives birth to a baby right now, and that baby is going to die if nobody takes care of him. I don't. In other words, I don't really understand the argument. It seems like you're arguing that because the baby cannot survive on its own, therefore it's not a baby. Well, okay, if you take a a baby that was born 6 months ago and just leave him to his own
No,
devices, it's going to die.
here's the key distinction. If you could take that baby and give it to a different family and it would survive, versus the fetus, you cannot give it to a different family. You cannot take it outside the mom's womb and have it survive. That is the big difference there.
Okay, I mean, I could see that difference, but I mean, this goes to show how, in my opinion, how evil modern day technology has become, because this isn't a conversation people would even have thousands of years ago. This wouldn't even be this concept wouldn't even be a concept to take a baby outside the womb and just leave it somewhere. This wouldn't even be maybe be a little more specific. I might be missing your argument.
Yeah, I think you are. So there's a key distinction in terms of levels of consciousness between a 1 month baby and 1 month fetus, or whatever. Let's just say I'll use it differently. I'll say 1 year old, like a 1 year old, right? That 1 year old sure cannot survive completely on its own, but you could give it to a different family. You could give it to a foster family, and it can survive. It is not directly tied to the mother for its survival, because okay, the 1 year old baby, if the mother dies, that baby could survive, versus the 1 month fetus, if the mother dies, that baby's dying too. So they're directly intertwined, which is a difference than something that's not directly intertwined.
Okay, I mean, sure, that's true, but what does that have to do with abortion? I mean, I agree that if you take a 1 month old baby inside the womb and take it outside the womb, I mean, it's not developed enough to live, sure, but what's that have to do with?
It has to do with my point. There's different levels of consciousness. There's different levels of life. There's different levels of consciousness. So it goes back to my point that a 1 month fetus is not a baby yet. It's a potential baby. But it really what it is a fetus, right? It's directly related to the mother. If the mother dies, it will not survive. If the mother has a stillbirth, it will not survive. If the mother has any number of things that could happen, it will not survive. So at that point, it doesn't have the same level of consciousness as a baby.
Okay, I mean, yeah, it doesn't have the same level of mental consciousness, but I would argue it's still a baby, just because it's a 1 month old baby inside the womb that is physically dependent on the mother. And yeah, you take it outside the womb, it won't survive. Okay, that doesn't make any less of a baby. That just makes it a baby that needs to be inside the womb to survive off the mother and cannot survive outside the mother. It's still a baby. Just because it needs to be in a certain place dependent on a certain person to survive doesn't make any less of a baby.
Yeah, I don't want to argue about semantics. Like you
Okay.
keep baby, but I mean, I consider fetus. But either way,
Well, the reason I say that is because, no disrespect to you, but a lot of pro-choice people, they use certain language to lessen the blow, to morally justify, because if they were to say, oh yeah, I totally want to kill a baby, that would sound bad. Although in 2022 a lot of them just straight up say that, which is really insane. But if you say fetus, it sort of lessens the blow, because it's like, oh, I would never want to kill a baby, but a fetus, yeah, that's totally different. So usually I don't argue over semantics either. I find that to be annoying when you're splitting hairs, but in this case the language is very, very important, because you're taking what I consider to be a baby and you're simply calling it a different name to justify murder. So of course, the language is very important.
Yeah, the thing is though, if we look according to the standard Webster's definition, like what you're describing would not be a baby. A baby is the verbatim definition is a very young child, especially one newly or recently born. So the way like Webster's and pretty much everything defines baby is something that's been born. So I mean, again, like if you want to go off.
Okay, so you're going to base your morals on Webster dictionary?
No, I'm basing my definition of what a baby is off a standard definition.
Okay, brother, but they can change the dictionary tomorrow. So I understand what you're saying. I'm not trying to be rude at all, but
the whole thing is that like pro-choice people change the wording to make it sound more more acceptable, but that's not really the case. They're just going off standard definitions.
Okay, but I'm saying the dictionary can change tomorrow. They can say that, they can come out with a new dictionary tomorrow that says a baby has to be 5 years old. I don't know. Like, who makes the if we're going off dictionary definition, I mean, a dictionary, they can print a new one out tomorrow. So I don't I'm just going off of science and just,
Well, you're going off a definition that suits your argument, basically.
I mean, you could say that for either side, but I think mine would be a lot more accurate because obviously, if there's something living inside of a mother, I'm going to call that a baby. Even like no matter what the Webster dictionary says.
Right. So you're saying I'm going to call it what I want, regardless of the definition.
Yeah, I mean, if the Webster dictionary, says that, I don't know, I can't think of an example right now, but the Webster dictionary can be wrong. I mean, I've never heard of this. I've never heard of this before, but they're saying a baby has to be outside the womb to be a baby. So a 9-month-old baby inside the womb is not a baby, according to Webster dictionary.
Yes, correct. A baby is considered something.
So it's obviously wrong. Like, go ahead.
But do you see what you're doing here? You're saying that something that like is a standard definition is wrong, but what you want it to be is right. Like, I think that you would just be better off just acknowledging, like, okay, dude, whatever. I have a different definition. I prefer using the word baby over fetus, but I acknowledge the fact that this is definition that like most of the world operates on.
Yeah, I can acknowledge that it's what most of the world operates on. I mean,
okay, so
I have no problem being counterculture. I mean, most of the world is wrong about a lot of things.
So it's not the pro-choice people who are twisting the definition. It's really the pro-life people.
No, I would not agree with that because it seems you're making the argument that that since the beginning of time it has been normal to call it a fetus, and then somewhere along the line, pro-life people decided to call it a baby to suit their argument, when in reality it's the complete opposite. Since the beginning of time, it's been well known if a woman's pregnant, she has a baby inside of her, like before the Webster Dictionary was ever created. And then somewhere along the line, they started calling it a fetus. So I would have to disagree. I think you have the order reversed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm operating on definitions that have been used for like the last 200 years, not for the definitions that like some caveman was using like 5,000 years ago.
Okay, but the world's a lot older than 200 years, brother.
All right, but modern science wasn't even around back then. Abortion wasn't even a thing back then. So that's like, if you're going back to like 2,000-year-old like definitions, okay, sure, I guess what some caveman was calling something growing inside the mom. But again, I don't want to get too off track. But the general point I'm making is,
I don't know, man. Would it, would a husband and wife ever, the wife's been pregnant for about a week, and the husband says, "Oh yeah, she's been pregnant for a week. That's a beautiful fetus inside of her." Like, who knows? In 2022, maybe people talk like that. But
I mean, that's just phrasing. If we're going off standard, I'm just arguing against your point that it's pro-choice people who are twisting the definitions. Well, that's not the case. They're just going off standard definitions.
Well, I will say this. So, regardless of the definition according to the Webster Dictionary, I will acknowledge that in the world we live in, fetus might be the correct, I don't know, term, definition, whatever, because obviously the Webster Dictionary can make any definition for anything they want. So I'll acknowledge that, but I'm just saying that pro-choice people definitely love to use the word fetus, whether it's correct or incorrect. They definitely love to use that word to dehumanize and justify.
Yeah, and pro-life people love to use the word baby because that also suits their argument. Both parties engage in that. Language is a very common tool for persuasion. But that aside, okay, I want to get back to your like initial argument, which is I think what the thing that matters is that so you're saying that the ultimate end goal is to save the lives, right? Like the reason you're pro-life.
Yeah, I heard that. I'm gonna let you go on, but yeah, healthcare, private sector, yeah. Go ahead.
So would you be for universal healthcare?
Well, the gentleman that was on yesterday, he did a decent job. He tried his best, but you're comparing apples to oranges because I've heard you're making the argument that if pro-life cares about life, they should give everybody universal healthcare because it will save lives.
Yes.
It's not exactly the same. It's not really that black and white because what I care about is, there are pros and cons to universal healthcare and private healthcare, and that got covered yesterday. What I care about as a person who's pro-life is I want to give that baby that's inside the womb a shot at life, because my moral compass tells me that I have no right to not give that baby a shot at life, even if they grow up in a bad neighborhood, bad conditions, bad parents, bad foster care system, whatever it is. Obviously, that's less than ideal, but at least they still have a shot at life. 50 Cent grew up in fucking horrible circumstances. Now he's a millionaire, maybe billionaire. So with that being said, I want to give that baby a shot at life. But when somebody is a 20-year-old grown adult, you know, I have compassion for people that are poor on the one hand. But on the other hand,
let's take like a poor person who can't afford healthcare. They're like, let's just say they're like 18, 19 years old.
Okay.
Just finished high school. They can't afford healthcare. Do you think they deserve a shot at life, or should they?
Well, that's the way you ended is completely inaccurate. Do they deserve a shot at life? They've already had 19 years of life. So listen, you were talking about consciousness before, different levels of consciousness. Obviously, a baby inside the womb, 1 month old, 6 months old, like somebody has to save that baby. That baby cannot save itself. Now, a 19-year-old person that's poor, yes, on the one hand, I do have some compassion for them. But on the other hand, you're 19 years old, you're an adult, you're fully functioning, you have full consciousness. Figure out a way to make some money, figure out a way to do something. This is a false equivalency, because it seems like you're trying to say if pro-lifers want to save a baby inside the womb from getting killed, then they should be morally obligated to give free stuff to every single person on the earth. That's false.
No. You're twisting my argument. First of all, not everyone on Earth, just U.S. citizens, because this is U.S. law. Yeah, I am pointing out the hypocrisy of pro-lifers caring about life until it comes out of the womb, and then this like general disregard. So, okay, you said 19 years old, they have whatever, they're an adult. What about a 15-year-old?
I mean, I'll admit, I'm not an expert on our medical care system. Yeah, I mean, obviously I want people with problems to get help, but
so are you for giving universal health care to everyone until they turn 18?
Until they turn 18. There are pros and cons to both. I would say probably better to talk to an economist about that.
I want to figure out your moral position, not economist.
Well, because my moral position is, if we could take care of everybody, that would be great. But at the same time, if the only way to do that is to tax the living shit out of the hardworking man, then do I feel morally good about telling a guy who worked his ass off his entire life and works 100 hours a week and start his own business that I'm going to take a good portion of his paycheck and his money to, somebody that is 19 years old? Maybe they just can't afford it because they're lazy.
Do you feel good about telling a woman who's not ready to have a child, who's not ready to give up her career, and a potential father of 18 years of child support about having the baby? There's no easy choices in either one of these.
No, right? That's the easy one. Yes, I do.
Okay, but you don't feel, but then for like a 15-year-old who just doesn't have health care and is going to die, that's like more acceptable, I guess?
No, that's not what I said at all. So I said, obviously it would be good to help everybody who needs help, but at the same time, I don't want to steal from the hardworking man in order to do it. So let me say this. If there is a way to not tax people too much money and give everybody health, okay, so there's not a way. So that's why the issue is not black and white. So, but here's the thing, with universal health care,
neither one of these issues is black and white. They're both complex, intricate issues.
I mean, I would disagree. I know I go against probably what a lot of people think, but I would disagree. And here's the reason why. Because when you're talking about giving someone universal health care at the expense of taxing to death another man, that is a bit complex. Because, on the one hand, you want to help the person who needs the health care. On the other hand, you don't want to basically rob money from the hardworking man. But when it comes to this issue of abortion, I mean, it's coming down to should this baby have a chance at life, or should the baby be killed because it's not convenient for the mom and the dad? That's black and white, brother.
No, it's not. It's both of these involve sacrifice. So the sacrifice, if we have a law that says no abortions are allowed, it requires a sacrifice on the part of the potential mother, the potential father, and the state. It requires sacrifices on all three of those parts. If we
Okay,
have,
but
hang on, let me just finish.
yeah, good.
We have universal health care that requires a sacrifice on the people who make more money, right? Because they're going to be taxed more. Both of those require sacrifices, and both of them have the same end goal: is we save lives. If we do universal health care, we're going to save people from dying. If we get rid of abortion, we're going to save potential babies, let's just call them that, from dying, right? Both of them involve sacrifice, and both of these involve saving lives.
Okay, so the difference is, like I said before, and I'm gonna add a little bit more to it to a little bit of new stuff. So a baby can obviously not save itself, especially inside the womb. So somebody has to save that baby from what I consider to be possibly one of the most evil modern day inventions of all time. Now, a 19-year-old, depending on who they are, they
Okay,
can maybe do some things.
let's take a 12-year-old.
Hold on, I do want to add something before we get too far. Is that okay? Before we get like
Yeah,
too far off the.
go ahead.
So with the example you just gave, that giving birth to a baby is going to be going to take a lot of sacrifice from the mother, the father, and the state. That's just the most selfish thing I've ever heard. Because when I'm looking at the four people in those equation, I'm looking at the mother, the father, the state, and the baby. I massively prioritize the baby above all three. The baby is massively prioritized above the mother, above the father, above the state. So, any man, woman, government official, whatever, who says, "Oh, it's more convenient to kill this baby, so let's just do it," no, that's massively selfish.
But
So that's a big difference.
But why is a 12-year-old who grew up in a poor family, whose parents are unfortunate, does not deserve the same sacrifice from a rich person?
No, I agree. Like, let's help people as much as I can, but it has to be fair to all sides, because you are painting a very black and white picture. Because you're assuming that if somebody's poor, then that's like not their fault at all. And,
No,
and
no, I'm not. Hang on. Let's be
okay.
clear. First of all, I'm not a.
Well, the way you're phrasing it though is like, oh, there's this like poor, like this poor person,
When we do hypotheticals, we have to simplify things, because otherwise it just becomes too complex, right? So no, I acknowledge there's more complexity to than that. But let's just try to make this a clean analogy. Let's take a 12-year-old who is a hardworking young kid, right, in middle school, whose parents are poor for whatever reason. Doesn't really matter. It's not a fault of the kid. And because his parents are poor, he doesn't have health insurance. And he has diabetes or something like that, or maybe even something more serious that can kill him, but could be prevented if he had health care, right? What about that 12-year-old? Doesn't he deserve the same level of sacrifice from rich people as that potential whatever baby fetus would from the state? Like, why is there this double standard?
I can see that argument more. Um, to be fair, I'm not an expert in universal healthcare or the private sector. So before you jump in, um, even looking at it from a moral perspective, if the private sector can get the job done, without having too much of a tax burden, that would be good. But to answer the question, yes, of course, if a 12-year-old needs something, I would like for that to be done, but it's more complex than that. And what I would really like to see happen is, because I'm not for or against welfare, by the way, but the way we do it right now is terrible, because we basically say, hey, if you're poor, you get free stuff, and that's not good. What I would love to see happen is, if somebody that is poor can meet a certain set of requirements, I think welfare should be conditional.
Yeah, dude, I completely agree with you on that. Like, there's no disagreement there. I'm not a big proponent of like welfare state and shit like that. I want to not go off track. I want to focus on this
Okay.
On this analogy.
Yeah.
So let's just assume that granting universal health care. Well, actually, we don't need to assume. Let's go off a study. So I got my notes. So Harvard study, we can agree Harvard is pretty reliable, found that every year about 44,000 people in the U.S. die from a lack of health insurance. So that means that they don't have like fatal diseases that they would have died from anyway. That means they have preventable things that they could have survived from if they had health insurance. So 44,000 people every single year, Americans who die from a lack of health insurance. First of all, that's like pretty disgraceful for a first world country. But that aside, right, those 44,000 people, let's just assume that, I don't know, 20% of them are children. So that's like, I don't know, 5,000 children, 5,000 kids, 5,000 kids dying every single year from a lack of health care, right? So are you for doing universal health care for everyone under 18 then?
Brother, I can't give you a yes or a no because let me do this is the best I can give you, okay? If
So,
there was
well, it should be like actually a very clear yes or no.
No, because no, because you're trying to simplify it. Let me tell you this. If there was a way for everyone under 18 to have universal health care in a way that was fair to everybody, that didn't have any negative unintended side effects to society, that didn't rob the rich man, then okay, sure.
That's not possible. Universal healthcare, this is what liberals never really admit. Universal healthcare is very expensive. It costs a lot of money. There's no way to have universal healthcare without either going into even more debt or increasing the taxes. You really have to increase taxes. That's the only way.
and I want to say something too about what I heard in the debate yesterday. This might be I just gotta say this. So you're talking about all these countries in Europe that have this universal health care and how great it is. First of all, a lot of those.
Great. I think there's a lot of problems. Let me clarify.
Okay.
I'm not an advocate of universal health care in the U.S. I think there's a lot of issues with universal health care. We can't deny the fact that if we do universal health care, we will save people's lives, despite the fact that we will tax the shit out of the rich. So
but stopping abortion doesn't take tax money. Like you just don't have an abortion. So we're taking one argument, which is stopping abortion, which costs zero tax money.
But that's not really true. It costs zero money in the short term, but actually costs a lot of money in the long run because a lot of those unwanted children are going to go into foster care. They're going to be a burden on the state. I was kind of doing some research after.
Brother, that's such a. I'm not directing this at you at all. I understand you're just giving your argument. But to a lot of the pro-choicers, that is such a selfish way to look at it. That a baby coming in.
Argument about universal health care is such a selfish way to look at it that rich people shouldn't pay more in taxes.
You could make that argument, but the difference is okay. If it's a little bit of if it's a burden on the state for a baby to be born into the world instead of being killed, I'm okay with that. Now, when we're talking about, grown adults being too poor to go to the doctor, that's a different thing because it's different levels of consciousness.
We're talking about 12-year-olds who are poor through no fault of their own, who don't have health insurance. That's what we're talking about right now.
Okay, so my answer, I've given my answer. If, yes, that would be ideal, but I don't know what other consequences would come from that.
Well, I can tell you, one of the consequences is a burden on the state, right? If we have universal health care, that's going to be a burden on the state. Let's just try to simplify it. So why?
Honestly, at that point, there's a really good argument to be made that if there's some parents that can't afford to take their fucking kid to the doctor, maybe adoption is an option at that point.
I mean, you're oversimplifying that part significantly. Like, lack of health insurance is not grounds for someone to have their child taken away. I guess that's more of like an opinion thing. But again,
I said maybe, by the way. I'm not taking a one or the other, but I'm saying maybe that could be a conversation to be had.
Okay, yeah. So again, let's go back to this. Why you're okay with there being a burden on the state in order to save like a potential? I'll just use your terminology to save a baby, right? You're okay with there being a burden on the state because we're saving a baby's life or fetus, whatever. It doesn't matter what you call it. But why are you not okay with having a burden on the state to save a 15-year-old or a 12-year-old? Why is a fetus more important than a 12-year-old?
So, okay, I can answer both of those. So, first of all, I never said I was or wasn't okay with a 15-year-old having universal health care. I simply said it would be ideal as long as it didn't have, unintended consequences, side effects, etc.
It will have a whole bunch of negative side effects. We have to acknowledge that reality. Just like it will have a whole bunch of
Okay.
negative side effects to overturn Roe versus Wade. I guess the question I'm confused about is
And
why.
and also too, I don't know. We already have Medicare in this country. I don't know how good it is or how bad it is, but I mean, that. So you're asking me a question I just don't know because I don't know. Like, well, I don't know healthcare. I don't go to the doctor, bro. Like, I'm healthy,
Well,
so I don't know.
let me set the parameters, right? So let's just do a thought experiment. Let's say, and this is, I think, based in reality, the parameters I'm going to set. Let's say that implementing universal health care will save, I don't know, 5 to 10,000 American children and teenagers a year, right? And it will cause, I don't know, taxes on rich people to go up by 40% or 50%, something pretty drastic, right? That's fairly realistic picture I'm painting, right? Say that what's it called? We can prevent those 4,000, 5,000 children of dying by taxing the rich people more, right? You, generally speaking, because we can't say, well, if there was no unintended consequences, because we don't live in that world. Universal healthcare is very, very pricey. So why are you not okay with those side effects in this situation, but you're okay with the side effects in the abortion issue? It seems like, again, there's this like double standard, and I see this like all the time on the right, where it's like, and I'm not on the left either, by the way. I actually, some of the issues I agree with the right on, but like on
Yeah, I
this,
know.
it just boggles my mind how there's this like double standard, and it's like, oh, we really care about human life until it comes out of the womb, in which care we don't even care enough to give them universal health care, right? So it's like we care about the well-being of the child, and then when it comes out of the womb, we don't really care that much.
Okay, so with these two scenarios, let me just say this from a practical standpoint: if you could only get one of them done, which would be more important? Obviously, the baby getting to see life. So I'm not necessarily saying I'm against teenagers having, healthcare. I'm just saying if you can only get one done because the other has so many consequences, then you have to prioritize which one is more practical, which one can get done.
But we don't have to pick one. We can easily get both of them done. They both
Yeah.
have.
So,
They both,
brother, I just don't know.
they both have negative side effects. It's they both have
I've
unintended.
never, I've never, and to be honest, I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but I've never heard of a 12-year-old not being able to go to the doctor through Medicare, through the school, through some program, through something. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
it definitely happens. You should watch the movie John Q. It basically highlights this problem perfectly. But it's not even complete lack of healthcare. Quite often, a lot of those families, they have a lack of adequate healthcare, right? So they don't have the kind of healthcare they need, which would be universal healthcare. But again, universal healthcare is very expensive. There's no way around universal healthcare without taxing rich
Yeah.
people more.
So the
No way
thing
around.
is, though, what I do want to say is I hear this argument all the time that the pro-lifers only care about the baby until the baby is born, and it's really not a good argument because now here's the thing. You know, if we could get better foster care system and better things, that would be great. Again,
But that's like
if it.
if we could get women from that's like exactly you could say the same thing. If we could get women to be more responsible with birth control and women not to get pregnant.
I don't put it all on the woman. I don't put it all on the woman.
Wait,
If
wait, you
there's
put
a
it on the,
if there's
if we,
an accidental pregnancy, it is 100% the woman's fault and 100% the man's fault.
okay, I'm saying if we could just get people in general to be more responsible, then we wouldn't even have this Roe versus Wade thing for sure. But that's a big if. Just like if we could get the foster care system to be better, that's a big if. That's those are not the things that are on the
So
table.
I guess what I'm trying to say is getting the foster care system better, everything like that. I'm not morally opposed to it, but there are practicalities. But what I was going to say to sort of finish the point is I hear this all the time. Oh, pro-lifers only care about the baby until the baby is born. Well, that's not a good argument because I'm not saying things couldn't be better, but it's not a good argument because it's better to give someone a shot at life, even if their circumstances are not that great, than to say, oh, well, this kid's going to have some bad circumstances, so let's deprive him of that shot at life and just kill him right here. Because if that's what we did to everybody, there wouldn't be a 50 Cent, there wouldn't be a Jay-Z, there wouldn't be any of these people who came from rags to riches, who discovered, how to become successful out of bad circumstances.
Okay, so a few things. So first of all, no one is saying that we should force people to get abortions. All people like me are saying is that
no, but they're saying the option. They're saying the option should be there because the kid might.
Yeah, the mother should make up her opinion. But I do think that's actually a very good argument. Without saying what you said, you don't think is a good argument because it's a logical consistency. Because if the most important thing to pro-lifers was protecting American people's lives, then it would be a no-brainer for them to give universal health care, at least to everyone under 18, despite the fact that it's a drain on the system. Because if the end goal is saving lives, like that's what we prioritize about everything else, then it's a no-brainer to give universal health care for everyone under 18. Or everyone in general. Like, why is it?
But I will also say this is important because when we're talking about these things, there is the moral aspect and also the economic aspect, and a lot of people on the left try to completely separate the two. There's these countries in Europe that, okay, they have universal health care. Okay, cool. The reason they have that is because America protects them and they don't have to spend much money on their own military budget. If America decided tomorrow, hey, we're not going to protect Europe, all of a sudden, all these great, programs they have, this universal healthcare, all of a sudden they might be a little short on funds. So it's a hypocritical argument to, for the liberals trying to completely disconnect, who's trying to say, oh, like money shouldn't be a factor. Well, in these European countries, obviously money is a factor because they depend on America to do what they do.
Okay, so you're talking about something completely different here, and I don't even necessarily disagree with you. Something completely different. So I don't know if there's too much more left, but I guess I will stand by this till the day I die. I think that if the end goal is saving lives, then universal healthcare should be a no-brainer.
So what?
Because it saves lives.
Right. So.
And I think a 12-year-old is at least as important as a 1 month year old or whatever, 1 month old fetus, baby, whatever you want to call it. Right? I think it's at the very least equal in terms of its level of life, if not much more so. So I would argue that if we're going to pick one, protect a 12-year-old child or protect a 1 month old baby, I think the 12-year-old child probably has more moral value.
Well, how's he going to grow into a 12-year-old if you kill him inside the womb? Now, okay, listen, the universal healthcare, that can go on forever. But I will say this about abortion itself: it's going to always come down to. This is what it all comes down to. All these arguments is going to come down to: do you think life begins at conception? And do you think it's a baby or just a clump of cells? And that's what it's always going to come down to because, if I did the research and I thought life does not begin at conception, it's not a baby, it's just a clump of cells, I would probably be pro-choice because I would just say, whatever, it's a clump of cells. That's what it comes down to.
Let's quickly dive into that then. What is your definition of life?
I've never thought about that before. I've never had to verbalize it. So I don't know. I feel like there's all these like subjective opinions, like, oh, if it can feel pain, if it can do this. But I would just say, conception. Based on the research I've done, I would say conception.
Like but like, how do you define life? Like, okay,
if a woman is 1 second pregnant, that's a life.
Okay, so what about if I don't know, a baby cow is growing inside the it doesn't stop at human?
Bro, yeah. So I'll fully admit I place human life above animal life, of course. And
okay.
And the really, it's funny, Alex, the really radical PETA people, the people who place animal life above human life, they would call me a speciesist for that. I know it's probably the most dumbass word you've ever heard in your life. Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean, I'm a
I agree. I
species.
also place human life significantly above animal life. So,
Yeah, I know you agree. I was kind of just adding that for entertainment value. There's a word called speciest, and
right,
yeah,
yeah,
I mean, I place human life above animal life. If there's a cow, I'm not sure how that would happen. Maybe, maybe your girl was like doing things when you were on vacation. I don't know. But if there's a cow growing inside a woman, I mean, yeah, kill that cow. I mean, bro, like I just got out of a restaurant. There's dead cows in there right now.
well, I
So
guess like you told me when you think life begins, but you haven't answered the question, what is life? Like, for example, for me, life is sentience, right? When you can perceive and feel things and consciousness, that to me is life. So, like, you've answered the question when you think life begins, but you haven't really answered what is life.
it is life.
What does it
But
mean to be alive?
I feel like the two go hand in hand because if a life is begun, that is a life. I mean, yeah, there's all these subjective ways you can define it. Like, oh, it's when they have their first finger. It's when they feel pain. It's when they
Right.
blink for the first time.
I
Whatever it is.
yeah. Because
Yeah.
the way the way you've defined life, there's no way anything could any study, any bit of research could ever refute that because you've defined life as something that happens.
Hey, by the way, I just want to say my phone is on 2%, but I am near a charger this time. If it does die, would it be possible for me to like charge it, then maybe hop on like later on?
Yeah, sure.
Not right away, but later on.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. We can. I mean, I was trying to go through like there's like 20 people backstage, or not 20, but like five.
God damn.
I was trying to like go through everyone, but I guess like yeah. So let me just
I will say this real quick though. Definitely watch Steven Crowder. Obviously, he's
I
conservative,
do.
whatever.
Yeah, I
But
do.
okay, but if you watch his specific episodes about abortion, like his "Change My Mind" and his newest one on Roe v. Wade, you will be amazed. I'm not saying this is every pro-choice person, but it's like 99% of them. When he talks to these pro-choice people, their arguments crumble so fast because this is what I have noticed. I'm not saying this is true of everyone, but people who are pro-choice, they usually it's not really like an emotional issue for them. It's not really an issue for them. They never felt compelled to really dive into it that deep. They probably just accepted like the mainstream narrative, like, oh yeah, you know, it's clump of self. But it's not any.
Oh, I guess his phone died. Damn. Okay. Well, let me just. I know what point he was getting at. I don't think that has to do with pro-choice, whatever. Pretty much everyone crumbles when they debate Steven Crowder because he's pretty good at doing debates. He's done them for a while. I certainly would not crumble if I debated him. Also, you got to watch Steven Crowder crumble when he debated Joe Rogan, right? So it's like that has more to do with the skill of the debater, right? So yeah, like I don't know if that has anything to do with like the argument at all. Like I definitely would not crumble if I debate Steven Crowder. I think he's decent. He's probably equal to me in terms of skill of debate, maybe a little better, but not significantly. Versus if I was debating like Ben Shapiro, I would really struggle with that one. That would be like more of like a really like the challenge for me would be to debate Ben Shapiro. Hopefully, I can make that happen one day. Okay, let's bring on the next person. Okay, hello.
Hey, what's up, man? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. What's going on?
All right, good. All right, cool, man. Yeah, I was waiting backstage for a while, so good. I'm not gonna I have to run in a little bit, so probably like only a few minutes. So
Okay.
I just wanted to uh understand your argument. You said you value the life of the fetus after consciousness, right? Like when consciousness starts or sentience.
Not exactly. I value the life of a fetus even at 1 week old. I whatever. Like I just think there's different levels of life, and I think once it hits sentience at 4 or 5 months, that's when it becomes more important of a life. And then once it's born, it becomes even more important of a life. So I think that the line there, we do need to draw a reasonable line in the sand. I think it would be like really messed up if a woman could do an abortion like one day before she's about to give birth and that baby could have survived outside her body. Like I think pretty much everyone except like the most hardcore.
That's you know, it being the baby surviving outside of the body is a different standard. There's that's viability. So viability happens much Am I,
So
am I
I'm drawing the line at sentience, which is 4 or 5 months
drawing
old.
the line of sentience, right?
Yeah.
Not viability, because viability happens much later in the pregnancy. I believe it's like 20, maybe 24 weeks.
No, I think I would probably draw the line of sentience or even a bit earlier. But I think I don't have a hard line in the sand. Like I think I could be swayed to do 1 month earlier, 1 month later, based on like science and like arguments. So meaning like I'm not super dead set on like 4 months. Like I think I could be persuaded a few months in either direction based on a good argument.
Well, I mean, if you don't have a line in the sand, it kind of has your argument incoherent because just based on technology, if we were to develop some type of technology that could like in a hypothetical situation, like 100 years from now, if we were able to develop some type of technology to harvest a fertilized egg 24 hours or the instant after it was fertilized, and it could be viable outside of the womb from this magical machine that we created. At that point, would you then still would you give it more consideration, or would it be okay for a mother to abort that particular thing in this hypothetical scenario?
Yeah. Okay. So, two-part answer to that. So, first of all, I think not having a hard line in the sand is totally okay in this type of argument because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. I've read a good amount of studies, but I haven't read every study. So, I don't think it really. I'm not arguing for. Okay. So, Roe versus Wade gave protection to women to get an abortion up until I believe 3 months, something like that, right? So, what I'm saying is like I'm okay. I'm okay with going back to that and like just playing it safe and leaving that line at 3 months, right? So I don't think that part is as relevant. In terms of the hypothetical scenario, if that day came where we have some kind of artificial technology where you can take like a 1 month fetus and have it grow up on its own, would my position or versus weight change? It would probably influence it to some extent, but I don't think it would drastically change.
Okay, so I think there's two separate levels of argument. If you want to talk about like the Supreme Court decision when it comes to Roe v. Wade and them overturning it versus like abortion in itself, it's kind of like two distinct things. So I don't know which one you want to focus on. Do you want to focus on like abortion in itself or the
Well,
the
I
Supreme
want
Court
to be
decision? Because
clear.
they go hand in hand, but they're separate. Because one is kind of arguing about morality, and then one is kind of arguing about like the legality of situations. So it's kind of like
Right. Yeah.
separate.
I'm more interested in like the legality, and I'll explain why. I think lying is
Okay.
really messed up. I don't think lying should be made illegal. So I make a very strong distinction. Actually, Ben Shapiro does the same thing between my personal ethics and what I think the law should be. Right, those two are not the same.
Okay.
For example, I would probably feel really guilty. Like let's say I got my girlfriend pregnant, and she was like, "Hey, Alex, it's up to you. Should I get an abortion? Should I not?" I don't know which way I would go, but like I think I would feel really guilty about doing that. So I'm not necessarily saying that everyone should just be cool with abortion. I'm just saying that we should not have the only way to do it is we should give legal protection to women to get an abortion up until a certain point. But I'm not saying that like I'm necessarily okay with it or that people need to be like 100% behind it. I just think that there's a difference between that and again what the law is. Like I think, for example, smoking is really really dumb, but I don't think it should be illegal.
Okay. So as far as from my understanding, now I'm not a lawyer, I don't have like a legal background or anything, but from my understanding, what just happened, this past decision, it was the Supreme Court pretty much saying that it wasn't unconstitutional for states to have abortion laws. So what Roe v. Wade actually did when the initial case was that states at that time period, states were implementing abortion laws, saying that it was illegal for women to have abortions. So it was challenged, and at that particular time, Roe v. Wade decided that it was states couldn't do that. Now, all this past decision did was kick it back to the states and saying that it's up to the states to decide. Some states can decide to have restrictions, and some states can't. So it wasn't necessarily saying that women had a right to an abortion. It's saying that
Yeah, I get that.
States can, yeah, it's kind of, I know it's kind of difficult. I'm saying because it's
No,
kind of
I get it.
backwards. This has a, yeah,
I fully get that. So yeah, so I've heard that argument before. Like, let the states decide. I feel like that's a little bit of a cop out because, like, let's just say something like the Civil Rights Act. Right, we pretty much 99.9% of people agree that was a good idea. Right, if the federal government was like, well, I don't know about the Civil Rights Act. Let's just leave it to the states whether they want to have segregation or not. Like, I would be like, yo, that's like super fucked up. Like, no, we should not leave that to the states. And this would be another one just like those things. Like, yeah, no, I dislike that argument. Let's just leave it up to the state.
okay. Well, I think,
Yeah.
yeah, that's where I think we would disagree because I think the, like you could even say slavery or anything that's like something to that significant. I think that's where we would probably disagree because when it comes to the abortion issue, it's not something like 99% of people agree on. It's definitely something that
Yeah,
divides us as a country. I
it's
mean, we're
much
deeply
more tricky.
divided, and I think that's reasoning some of the judges used in this case was saying that since this country is deeply divided on this particular issue, it's not in our hands to really make a statement when it comes on the
Yeah,
federal
the
level.
Supreme Court may what's it called? What's the term? May whatever pretend like this is about like, oh, this is really about the law, but it was a political move. Like, Roe versus Wade was fine for 50 years, and just so happens once there's like a massive conservative majority in the Supreme Court, it gets overturned. This was a political move. This was a political, ethical move. It was not really about like the ladder and spirit of the law. And furthermore, I've
Oh,
heard people
I would definitely disagree there.
they
As
they
far
use that
as
as justification, but again, it was if Roe versus Wade was so legally unsound, then why did it not get
it
overturned?
was, well, it was legally unsound. It is. I mean, the Planned Parenthood versus Casey even threw out some of the doctrine using Roe v. Wade. That's the second case that kind of like affirmed it, but not all the way because initially the Roe v. Wade was using like the trimester standard, and then um, if I recall correctly, Planned Parenthood versus Casey was a case that kind of threw out that standard and went with another standard, whether it was viability, and then they had this undue burden standard. This is kind of like convoluted,
Yeah,
but
I get that, but the main point is Roe versus Wade was allowed to stand for 50 years. So for 50 years, the Supreme Court looked at this, and there was pressure up until now to overturn it. That's something that like the right has been pushing for a while. But for 50 years, it was legally sound, and then just so happens now it's legally unsound. Like
right, yeah,
if it was still legally unsound, then it would have been overturned a year or two after like whatever passed.
Yeah, I would have to reject that premise. It could have there's been a lot of cases that have been overturned, but the sheer fact that has been 50 years doesn't make something more sound or not. It just means if it's legally sounded, it stands on its own. It doesn't, no length of
I'm
time
just saying that I'm not
grants the
buying.
legality. You know what I'm saying? Like no
Yeah,
length of time will grant the soundness of an argument. If it's legally sound, it stand on its own. So.
like, yeah, not to like quibble, but like for example, actually length of time does play a role. Because like let's take something like legalizing marijuana, like that's something at this point the vast majority of the country agrees should be done, but because it's been a Schedule 1 controlled substance for so long, there's like momentum or whatever you want to call it. But anyway, okay, that whole thing aside, what I'm getting at is I'm not buying that this was like some calculated legal decision because of out of respect for the Constitution. I believe this was a calculated political move based on judges who have pro-life values, right? And
Okay.
but like, let's just say, okay, I'll for argument's sake, I'll grant you the argument that maybe Roe versus Wade was like legally unsound. Like, let's just grant that premise for argument's sake. That still doesn't change the fact that I believe that there should be some kind of whether you want to have it passed by Congress or the Supreme Court or the executive branch, some kind of federal protection for women up until a certain point who want to get an abortion. Because when you don't have that, what you have happen is half the states, or allow abortion, half the states don't, and you're not actually preventing abortion. What you're doing is you're causing a lot of women to have to travel across state lines and do something that's expensive and annoying and a pain in the ass, right? So you're just creating an undue burden on the thing. So if anything, we as a country should make up our mind whether it's legal or illegal. But having it like be like partially illegal in some states is just like the worst of all worlds, basically.
Right. Well, that's the thing. A lot of people. This could delve into so many different tangentially arguments, but the how do I want to say this? There's like three branches of government, right? You have the executive, legislative.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Right. So the judiciary isn't there to make laws. It's only there to interpret and make sure things are, if something's constitutional or not. So if we want a law, if we as a country want a law to where it's abortion is federally protected, that's something we can vote on, and that's how it is now. I mean, if they're now, it's kind of left. They've kind of kicked it back to the legislators and saying it's on you guys. If you guys do want to pass a law, then at that time we could do that. Before it was the Supreme Court who had made that argument. Before, so
I get that argument. I've heard that argument. What I'm getting,
I mean, it's not an argument. It's the truth. Is what actually happened.
Yes, but what I'm getting,
if we wanted, as of right now, if we wanted to pass a law enshrining abortion, and there was votes for it, and it passed, it could be passed if it was voted on, if that many people supported that particular issue.
So let me try to understand your position. So would you say then you're cool with providing federal protection, with a federal law that allows abortion up until a certain point, if it is done through the legislature and not through the Supreme Court?
No, because I'm anti-abortion.
Okay, there we go. Well, that's at the end what it.
Well, I mean,
that's what it always boils down to.
We're talking about. I was just saying that would be the legal remedies to
right. But I'm just saying,
as far as like my moral compass, I wouldn't agree with that.
Yeah, so that's what I'm getting at. I'm not interested in the legal way.
Well, but before you said you were.
I care about the net effect. I care about the net effect and the actual, like, what happens, not the way it's done. I don't care if it's done through executive action, through legislature, through the Supreme Court. To me, that part is largely irrelevant. Also, the Supreme Court, let's not pretend like the Supreme Court doesn't, like, set policy and laws. The Supreme Court, all the branches.
Well, they're not supposed to.
Yeah, but all the branches of government have gone far outside of what they were intended to do by the founder. So let's not pretend like we live in a world where like each branch of government follows what's supposed to do, because then we have to like basically scale back literally like every form of government. So we have to like.
Right, I can agree with that. But
yeah, we have to apply the same.
So that brings me to the point as far as making the moral argument. It would be that I believe that life. Well, this is pretty. Let me lay out my position. Okay. I believe a human life. I think there's 7. I read somewhere there's like 7 characteristics to like that biologists recognize as a life. I have them written down here. I think they have to be made of cells. Have to have some type of DNA. Have to be able to like expel energy. Some type of metabolic process. Homeostasis, capacity for growth, ability to produce, and to respond to stimuli. And that would consider human life. Now, on its own, I wouldn't just grant, because on its own, that describes like my skin cells. And obviously I don't care if your skin cells die every day. But in conjunction with the fact that there's at the point of conception, there's a unique DNA from the mother and the father. And when that egg is fertilized and implemented into the woman's uterus, I believe at that point is when we should give that particular human life moral consideration, and we shouldn't allow abortion once that begins.
Okay, so I guess like what I was trying to get at with the last person, and like I guess he was having a little bit of a hard time with this question, but maybe like I don't know, it'll be like easier for you. Like, what is your because we first have to agree on like the definitions. So how do you define life? How do you define human life?
Yeah, so those 7 characteristics that I listed. I think on a consensus, people that's like the characteristics of life.
Those would apply to your skin, right, or like your sperm. So
that's why I said that. Yeah, that's when human life begins. Now, there's how do I say this? There's a bunch of situations to where there's a human life, but I wouldn't give that person more consideration. Like it'd be okay to kill them. Let's say if someone broke into your house, that person is living, but they want to kill you. Like,
right.
Like,
yeah, I mean, those are,
you get what I'm saying? So, like, human life on its own doesn't necessarily make me anti-abortion. It's the fact that I grant it moral consideration because there's a unique set of DNA between the mother and the father, and left to its natural processes without aborting that fetus or embryo or whatever you want to call it, it would become,
Right.
a baby outside the womb.
More often than not, yes, but there's a series
Yeah,
of
more often than not.
yeah.
Right.
But could you make that argument for the morning after pill? Because if left to its own devices at that point, there would be a baby. So shouldn't it then be legal for a girl
Well,
to?
the morning after pill doesn't work. You're talking about like a Plan B pill?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think the Plan B pill specifically, it doesn't destroy a fertilized egg. It actually prevents. I think it prevents the egg from. I would have to go back and
Either
look
way,
and
but
see
at the
actually what it
end of
does.
the day, left to if there wasn't for this left to their own devices, there's a good chance a baby would have been born, right? If the girl didn't take it. So, irregardless of like how exactly it works, like we can't deny that fact. When a girl takes a morning after pill, she kills a potential life that would have, there's a good chance it would have been born if she didn't take that pill.
Right. I don't grant that potential life at that stage. I don't grant that potential life moral consideration.
Okay, that's interesting. So yeah, so I guess like
Yeah.
what's what I'm trying to figure out is like where do you draw the line and why?
Like, yeah, when do I draw the line to say that it's not okay to abort this?
Yeah,
Essentially what you're asking me, right? Yeah,
like
the line is
because
when a sperm and egg and is fertilized and they come together to make a fertilized egg, and there's a unique set of DNA from the mother and the father, and that egg is implemented in the woman's uterus. Usually that happens like within 24 hours or 48 hours into conception. So at that line is where I would draw the line at. I
okay.
think it's the least. I'm not saying it's not arbitrary, but I think it's the least arbitrary of the lines, versus sentience, consciousness, viability, or even up to 9 months. I think it's the least arbitrary line of all of them, to where we can say at this particular set in time, this is when the egg has been fertilized, it has been implemented, and left to its natural processes. Then it would become a baby after 9 months.
Well, the natural processes thing gets thrown out because left to natural processes, if the girl didn't get the morning after pill, also baby would have been born. So I guess, yes, I do agree that's an arbitrary line. I guess I'm just more interested in the why. That's the stopping point because the heartbeat happens at 7 to 8 weeks. Sentience happens at 4 to 5 months, right? Those are also like potentially reasonable lines to be drawn. Why exactly at the point of like what is so special about let's just say once the egg fertilizes with the sperm compared to let's just say a week beforehand when the girl takes the morning after pill, but like the baby.
But I think there's a fundamental difference between when a unique set of DNA is created at that point. It's now another being. It's now another life. It's not just the mother's egg. It's not just the father's sperm. It's something new. And at that point, I think um, it's the most reasonable. I'm not saying it's 100% clear cut fact, but I think it's the most reasonable line that we could set at the beginning of when this creation of life started, and anything after that, I wouldn't be okay with aborting it.
Okay. Okay. I mean, sure. I mean, I think you can make the argument that any one of the other things I mentioned is reasonable, but okay. I think it depends on perspective. I guess
Right.
let me ask you like a few questions to kind of see
Okay.
your logic. So, would you be okay with like? Do you think there should be an exception if the girl was raped?
I'll answer that question, but first I'm going to say the vast majority of abortions, I think it's less than 0.5%, so
Right.
99.5%
Yep.
rape and incest. Okay, so I just want to table that. Would I make an exception for rape and incest? Morally, I would not. On a legal level, um, I'm kind of agnostic. I'm not sure. I think there is good arguments to be made for, um, abortion being available to women that um, have that happen to them. Um, but my individual self probably would say no, because um, it would never be a case to where the sins of the father, we would punish the child by death. So um, that'd be my take on it. But
But
legally, I could definitely see there. I'm kind of like teeter tottering on that. I'm not sure where I stand.
I guess
Yeah.
it's interesting that you're teeter-tottering on that, because I think this is like the pinnacle of unfairness, right? So the whole the reason that you are pro-life is because you think it's unfair to the baby that the mother is going to terminate it. Like, is that correct? Like, that's extremely unfair to deprive that potential fetus or baby of life, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's like the pinnacle of unfairness for a girl who has a career, who has like her life going, to be walking down the street, to be raped, and then to be forced to have to raise that child that came through zero fault of her own, right? Like, that she didn't like. You can make the argument like, oh, okay, well, she should have used protection, right? But you can't make that argument with that because she wasn't intending. So I think that one should be like a no-brainer. Like, if the end goal is fairness, like, why should we not be fair to those women who literally got pregnant through no fault of their own, and now they have to bear that baby to birth, even though like they literally did nothing wrong?
Right, right, and I totally, and that's a very strong argument, which makes me like lean that way. The
Okay.
only the only part I would disagree with, or the only qualms I have with that, is like I said before, it wasn't it's not the baby's fault that a woman became pregnant, as a result of rape. So by ending its life, it's the life is still innocent, and be ending an innocent life for the sins of a third party. That'd be my only qualms with it.
Well, yeah, there's no winners. This is just like, we're just talking about degrees of bad. So, by the way, just to
Right.
clarify my position, I'm not saying that I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with abortion. I acknowledge that there's a negative with aborting a potential life. Maybe that baby would have been an Albert Einstein or something like that, contribute a lot to society, right? So I'm not unsympathetic to that argument. I just think the cons outweigh the pros of overturning Roe versus Wade. I guess this is the argument that I keep making, but I guess I just want to see real quick where you stand on this. Are you in
Mhm.
favor of universal health care?
Am I in favor of universal healthcare?
Let's just, let's just
I don't. I
assume.
don't. Go ahead.
I'm saying, let's just assume, for argument's sake, the premise that if we implement universal health care, we will save 45,000 lives every year, American lives, and that's actually based on a Harvard study.
Yeah, I would have to see. You're talking about like universal healthcare, to where healthcare was there was a baseline level of healthcare provided by the government.
Yeah, where we basically had the same thing as like every European country, where the U.S. government gave healthcare to people who can't afford it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know too much about the healthcare industry and the economics behind that, but if there was a um, definitive way to prove that by having universal healthcare, um, short term, midterm, and long term, that it would save lives over time, um, then yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Okay, well, let me kind of outline the premises. So let's assume that universal healthcare will save 45,000 American lives every year, right? And that's like a pretty reasonable, because it's, again, based on a study. Let's also assume that universal healthcare is very expensive, which is also reasonable. And let's say that the only way we can have universal healthcare is by having a burden on the state and increasing taxes, right? So we get to save lives, but it's a burden on the state, and we have to increase taxes, right? So, are you still in favor of it because it's saving lives?
Am I am I am I still in favor if it saves lives as a burden on attention? Haven't really fully fleshed out view on this, but um,
We'll just
I
take a
don't
second and like
necessarily
kind
have to believe. I don't think I have to like bite the bullet. Even if I were to like grant you all of that, and even agree and bite the bullet and say I would be um in favor of universal health care, uh, it doesn't change the fact that I don't think that contradicts my anti-abortion views. I don't have to be necessarily pro-life. I would even say that you wouldn't consider myself pro-life because I'm not technically pro-life. If someone, in all situations, I'm anti-abortion, so I wouldn't, the pro-life and the pro-choice. It's really not pro-life, pro-choice. It's anti-abortion and pro-abortion. That's how I like to see it.
sure, we can. I mean, I don't think anyone is like pro-abortion. Like, yeah, fuck yeah, abortions are awesome. I think very few people are like saying that. I think most people are like me, where it's like, yeah, it sucks to get an abortion, but it still should be, the mother's choice up until a certain point, in which case it doesn't become her choice. Like, I think 95% of people who are like kind of think more or less similar to that. No one's like, oh fuck yeah, abortions are awesome, man, you should get one.
Some people are.
But very, very few. But the reason,
right.
But you sort of, here's the thing, is that I feel like, yes, if you want to be intellectually consistent and you want to, okay, so why are you pro-life, right? We'll just, or whatever, let's just call it that, pro-life, because you care about saving lives, right? Like you're saying that, well, yes.
Well, I think that's a little bit more reductive. I wouldn't say I care about saving lives. I think it's unjust to kill an innocent life in the womb. Yeah.
But is it just in the womb? What about an innocent 12-year-old?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm in regards to abortion. Yeah, in regards to abortion.
Okay, so it's so basically, you think it's unfair to kill any kind of innocent life? Innocent is the key word, not someone brings to their house that's not innocent.
Right, exactly.
So if we're following this logical train, then someone who can't afford health insurance, who dies from lack of health insurance, that's an innocent life, especially if they're like a teenager or a kid, right? So I do actually think you have to bite the bullet if you want to be consistent. And then you say, if you're pro-life, then yeah, you are pro giving universal health care to every U.S. citizen, because that will save lives and that will prevent an unfair taking of life. That will prevent innocent people from dying despite the negative consequences, like the burden on the state.
If it could be, the thing that, yes, I would, but that's simply not the world we live in, right? There would have to be, we would have to have some type of knowledge of because an abortion, we know 100%, if an abortion occurs, there's a 100% chance the innocent life is dead or is gone, is aborted. We know that for a fact. Now, in your scenario, you would have to prove to me 100%. Like you would have to prove to me 100%. If there was universal healthcare, it'd be 100. How am I trying to say this? You get what I'm trying to say, right?
I do get what you're trying to say.
You would have to prove to me that this universal healthcare system is 100% effective at saving lives, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's any way to prove it 100% without
exactly.
doing it.
See, exactly.
But hang on,
so
without doing it and seeing the drop off. But I think I can prove it to 99.9%. And there's a whole bunch of studies that show how many Americans die from a lack of health insurance. Which when it's a lack of health insurance, that basically means that it wasn't like some inevitable disease. It was something that could have been prevented if they had good health insurance. And it really just depends which study you go off. I've seen the figures range from $20,000 a month to $40,000-$50,000 a month. I'm just going off the Harvard study, which put at $40,000 a month. But I think it doesn't matter if it's $5,000 a month or $50,000 a month. The point is that there's some people in the U.S. who are too poor to afford health insurance, and that causes them to die, which is unfair, right? So I do think that, yes, if you're going to be consistent, if you want to be pro-life, then you also have to be pro, saving those innocent people's lives who can't afford health insurance. And I guess this is why the reason I keep bringing this up. I know my audience kind of gets a kick out of this and is like, oh, here we go, the healthcare.
Right. It's a bit of a non sequitur, but go ahead.
I disagree with that. I think because I see this weird double standard on the people who are pro-life, especially people who are conservative, who very much care about human life until it comes out of the womb. And then they don't really care that much, right? At least they don't care enough to inconvenience the state to give them universal health care.
Okay, well, hold on. Let me go ahead and
go ahead.
that.
Okay.
Because if we're taking rape and incest off the table, we're just talking about the 99.9% of abortions that are elective for whatever reason, right? We're taking rape and incest off the table at this point.
Sure, we can take it off.
Okay, gotcha. So in this case, there was a choice made, but it was before the woman got pregnant. If she was like I said, we're taking rape and incest off the table. She engaged in an act that would naturally lead to how I like to say is that she engaged in an act that forced a being dependent on her. So the easiest way to understand this is let's say there's this poison out there, and I was playing with this poison, and I knew if I kind of messed with this poison, it could eject someone, and that person would have to become dependent on me for 9 months. It's like knowing the risks is that, and I still engage in that act. I am therefore responsible
Well,
for the outcomes that happen. No,
you've oversimplified it a bit, but I mean, because sometimes, although this is rare, like they do everything right. Like the guy wears a condom, but then I actually have a friend who that happened to. Wore a condom, condom broke, so they did everything right. Like they thought they were using protection. This chick wound up having the baby, right? So that does happen. So it's not always like negligence, but yeah, let's just say vast majority of the time it is negligence. I'll grant you that point. I
right,
still don't see like the end goal is saving. The end goal, like you said, is it's unfair to that baby to be deprived of life, right? Because it has a
right.
life. But I still think it's equally unfair, if not more unfair, for like a 12-year-old whose parents can't afford health insurance to be deprived of life as well. Like either both are okay or none are okay, right? It can't be one or the other.
I'm not really catching the distinction there.
Okay.
Because I think we've already went. I understand what you're saying. I think we've already went over that. I would be okay with. Well, I think you were talking about conservatives sometimes contradicting themselves when they only care about life in the womb versus outside.
Not
I'd be
sometimes.
totally fine with. Right. I'd be totally fine with any type of program that would encourage safe sex, would encourage um, people making better decisions when it comes to having babies. And if that needed to be government funded or that needed to have the taxpayers pay for it, I'd be all for a
But
type
how,
of program
how
like
would
that.
that program even look? Like, how would we do that without like
Well,
how we already
you would
teach
obviously
sex.
try to encourage like the knowledge because people are like stupid when it comes to people don't even know how to put on a condom. So
Yeah,
obviously, like sex education, like programs that would like teach safe sex
yeah.
education,
The thing is,
stuff
we
like
already
that.
do that. Like, in middle school, we
But
have
we really don't though.
in public schools we do. We have like they do have
Not
like
really, not really. I mean, yeah,
we could do
it's
okay. We could do a better job at it. Sure, I think that
right.
would make a negligible difference at best because people are really dumb. Most Americans are pretty dumb. Most people in general. So yeah, a lot of people are even if we give them the best information, they're still not going to follow it correctly.
Right,
Oh,
and that's totally fine. But if if you engage in an activity knowing good and well that this activity could create another human life, you are responsible for that.
okay. Do you think there should be an exception if, for example, the guy wore a condom and or let's say the girl took birth control, but the baby still happened? So let's say the guy can prove that he put on a condom. Let's say he made a porno and can show, hey, Your Honor, look at this. I put a condom on. Everything was fine, but the condom broke through no fault of my own. There was no negligence. Do you think then the girl should be allowed to get an abortion?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily. It would be. Obviously, his intention wasn't to get the woman pregnant, but engaging in the act of self is negligence.
No, but let's
Can a
just
woman?
say
Can a woman? Can a woman get pregnant without having sex?
no. Let's just say he did everything right. Like he put on the condom, he took all the
Well,
precautions.
yeah. Well, yeah. That's the saying. There's a step before that. Can a woman get pregnant without having sex?
No, but then the only logical
Okay.
conclusion is that people should not
Right.
have sex unless they already have children, which is I don't know, is that your belief?
Uh, I wouldn't phrase it like that. I said if people shouldn't have sex without understanding that while they engage in this activity, there could be a chance they get pregnant. Like, and if they are, and if that does lead to that outcome, they are responsible for that. They're not allowed to. The woman is not allowed to abort the baby.
Well, so kind of what you said earlier is that is that there's negligence that's usually as a result of an unwanted baby being born, and I think that is usually true. But what I'm saying is, in the cases where there is no negligence, like the guy does.
The negligence is there in itself when they choose to have sex. That's when the negligence starts.
But so you think having sex unless you already have a kid is negligent, even if you use protection?
Yes.
Oh, so do you not have casual sex yourself?
Well, I do, but I understand that I understand that
So
what I'm
then,
partaking in, there could be a chance to get someone pregnant.
but when you say,
There's always a chance when you have intercourse.
but when you say you're still being negligent, then according to
Sure.
okay, so okay, do you see the contradiction there? Then that would kind of make you a hypocrite, right? Because
Um,
you're saying that the other people
but
are
I'm not gonna if I have casual sex with a woman and she gets pregnant, abort it.
Right, but let's say I'm assuming most women that you have sex with are not ready to have a kid. That's just like most women in general. So it's like, yes, you might not want to, but what about her, right? Like, let's say you were. I'm assuming you wear condoms when you fuck, right?
Yeah,
Okay, so
for the
you
most
do
part.
yeah, I do too. But so you do everything right, right? But there's still a chance that a baby could arise, and she, like, while you may be cool with it, she probably doesn't want that baby, right? So it's like, and she would have never gotten that baby if it wasn't for you sticking your dick inside of her. So you're being negligent by, I'm assuming you don't
Well,
ask
she
every girl.
consented. She consented to the negligence when she allowed me to penetrate her.
Right, but she did, but you're contributing to the negligence, right?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I think that's a little bit of a contradiction there, right? Because it's like, I mean,
Where's the contradiction?
well, the contradiction is that you believe it's negligent for people to have sex if they're not ready. If
I
they're
think
not
that's right. I think that's the wrong phrasing. It's not a matter of negligence. It's just that it's a matter of consequences that happen after the act takes place. So it's not necessarily your. I see the phrasing is a bit off, but I understand your point, but I don't think it's a contradiction though.
Well, I would see. I mean, I guess it depends on how you word it, but I do see like the way we've been discussing it is a contradiction because again, you are let's just say it's a negative consequence that you
Right.
might
It is. Well,
that you might.
depending who you speak. Yeah, I guess if you don't want to have a
Well,
baby, it
for,
would
for
be a
most of
negative
the women that
consequence.
you're having sex with and that I have sex with, it would be a negative consequence. Like 90, like
Right.
if you're fucking chicks off Tinder or cold approach, like 95% of them don't want to have a kid with you, especially if you're fucking them on like the first night or whatever. So like
Yeah,
so
but that would never be a reason to, and obviously in my worldview and how I view the situation, that would never rise to the level to justify taking an innocent life, and
sure.
that's a
Sure.
fundamental disagreement.
Yeah. That's your perspective, but that's not the actual contradiction. The contradiction is in the fact that this is something that you feel like it's irresponsible. Let's just phrase it like this: to
Right.
have casual sex unless you're ready to have a child, and you might have made your peace with that, but vast majority of women you fuck haven't, and you're contributing to that negative consequence, right? So it's a little bit of a hypocrisy in a way. It's not like a major
Nah,
one.
I would have to reject that, Alex. It's not a hypocrisy. If she consented to the sexual act, she is then consenting to
But she hasn't
the
consented to having a kid with you, right? You're not asking the chicks, "Hey, are you ready to have a child? Are you ready for this very small potential that I'm going to get you pregnant?" Like you and I are not doing that, I assume.
right, but the act of self is a the act of self, like, has her, if she consents to the act of self, she consents that there is a possibility that she can get pregnant. It's just because women can't get pregnant without having sex. I mean, it's just, the fact of the matter.
I mean, do you? Okay, let me ask this question: do you put where do you? How much of it do you think is the responsibility? Meaning, do you think it's entirely the responsibility of the woman? Do you think it's 50-50? Do you think it's more the responsibility of the man? Like, what's your take on that?
That's a good question. I think the man does have some responsibility
Okay,
in engaging when engaging in casual sex with a woman, but I do believe the woman has more responsibility because of the sheer fact that it is um, if she does get pregnant, it would then be on her to carry that
sure.
baby to term. So I do think that she has to be a little bit more diligent in who she decides to have sex with, because at the end of the day, it's going to be her body that she's going to be her body that carries the baby to term.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that, but you believe that the man has some responsibility, which I also think.
Of course.
Yeah. So if the man has, okay, so let me just kind of walk you through this logical thought process again. So
Hmm.
if the man has some responsibility, which we acknowledge, right,
Hmm.
and a vast majority of women that you and I fuck, well, not together, we don't know each other, just class. Uh, People are gonna be like, "Yo, you're fucking girls together with Theo." No, and then the vast majority of women we fuck it. You and I both know this, right? Like that most women, when they have casual sex, they don't want to have a kid. Like that to them is like fucking nightmarish, right? But
Right.
you and I know this. You and I know that the man has some responsibility, right? But we also think that you should be, it's irresponsible to have casual sex unless you already have a child. But we both know that the woman doesn't want to have the child. Then we're contributing to that problem, according to this logic. We're contributing to the irresponsibility. So we're saying one thing, but we're doing something else.
Well, I don't.
I mean, like, do you agree with the idea that generally speaking, you want to be responsible as a human being?
Sure.
Okay, so then, yeah, so then you're contributing to the responsibility. So you're doing the opposite of
Yeah,
what
but
you do.
I don't think that makes my position. Even if I am contributing to the irresponsibility with having casual sex, I don't think that makes my position inconsistent. To where if the result of my irresponsibility leads to a woman getting pregnant, it doesn't like there's everything flows from that. I don't see where even though I am contributing to the response, it doesn't like where does like
I
that's what
guess
I'm trying to figure out. Like,
inconsistency is the wrong word. I'll admit that. I think hypocrisy is a better word because it basically comes down to saying one thing and doing something a little different, right? It's like, well, people.
what am I saying? And I'm not doing that.
Well, you're saying it's irresponsible to have sex unless you're ready for the consequences. And you might be ready for the consequences, but you and I both know that the women are not ready for the consequences. And there's no way she would have gotten pregnant if it wasn't for you fucking her. So if you're following this line of thought, then you're contributing to the to the consequence that
I don't really see how the dots connect. I can see where you may believe that, but once she consents to the sexual act, that's where she consents. That's where she can, in my view, when she consents to the sexual act, that she then by de facto consents to the chance of she getting pregnant, the chance of her getting a disease, the chance of the condom breaking, the chance of anything happening. When she consents to that sexual act, she consents to other consequences that may happen. Because without having sex, none of those things happen. You understand what I'm saying?
Sure, yeah, but again, like you're contributing to the negative consequence. And look, for me personally, I don't believe you're contributing to anything by having safe sex. So I'm not opposed to the idea at all. So that's why for me to fuck a bunch of random hoes, that would not be like hypocritical, right? Because I don't believe that you're contributing to anything by doing that, right? Because I think whatever. But I guess like okay, like I don't know how else to like phrase this in a way that will like make more sense.
But whether or not we're irresponsible together doesn't change the fact that if a human life is created after both of us are being irresponsible, doesn't that's what I'm saying, doesn't rise to the level of sure, it's a bad consequence, but that bad consequence doesn't rise to the level of justification for the abortion.
It might not. It really depends on your perspective. Yeah,
Right.
I mean, it might not. It might. Yeah, I mean, that's not like my big argument against overturning Roe versus Wade. Like my big arguments against that are really, I think they boil down to three things: macro, which is meaning like if we overturn Roe versus Wade, which we just did, we're going to have an increase in crime. We're going to have a drain on the system. It's not a good thing from a macro perspective. One interesting study found that Roe versus Wade, passing Roe versus Wade, was responsible for a 50% decrease in violent crime in the early 90s. So 50%, which I think is drastic. That's like, me and you walking down the street, instead of both of us dying, only one of us dies. Like that's pretty drastic, like 50% decrease in violent crime. So that's my first argument. The second is freedom of the woman. I mean, at the end of the day, with laws, we're balancing freedom and public good, and we're balancing a whole bunch of things. But I do think it's like unfair for the woman who, I don't know, maybe accidentally got pregnant and she finds out she's pregnant. Now she's forced to carry that baby that she doesn't want. And I think the last component is that it also creates, because it's going to be legal in half the states, illegal in other one, it creates an unnecessary burden because the women who have money are still going to get the abortions. They're just going to have to travel, and it's going to be unnecessary expense, versus the women who are really poor are going to be the ones who get fucked. And then the last point I have is that I think it's also unfair for the guy who accidentally gets a girl pregnant, maybe a condom breaks, maybe whatever, and now he has to do 18 years of child support. So those are my argument. Those are my big arguments against it.
Okay. I gotta run really quickly, but I'll just go ahead and tell you why I disagree with I think you listed four. The macro argument, as far as it'll be a burden on the state or it will prevent violent crime. I reject this because it's never a situation to where, like, let's say in a hypothetical scenario, we could kill. Obviously, this is hypothetical. We could kill 1 million 1-year-old babies, and there was a definitive. We had knowledge from a being that if this happens, then we could there'd be some type of economic boom, or it would decrease poverty by 99% if we killed 1 million living babies. Would you be okay doing that?
No.
Okay, so that's my argument for the macro. It would never be a scenario to where we take an innocent life just for economic means.
But that doesn't dismiss the macro argument, right? That just
no, it doesn't dismiss it.
It just means it's
I think it dismisses it.
Well, no, it just you're just saying that's basically irrelevant in your opinion, but it's still that you're not arguing against the macro argument. You're just arguing.
I'm saying the macro argument isn't a just cause for abortion. For abortion to be legal.
I mean, that really just depends on your perspective and what you value.
Right.
Yeah.
As far as the second one was, you said the bodily autonomy, pretty much a bodily autonomy argument. I would just say that in the abortion argument, there's obviously certain point to where there's two, the fetus has bodily autonomy and the woman has bodily autonomy. It's just that in the case of abortion, we value the mother's bodily autonomy more than the fetus. I reject that. I don't think we should, because it was obviously taking rape and incest off the table. The mother engaged in an act that would force someone else to be dependent on them. So they engage in a sexual act knowingly, consensually, knowing that there is a natural consequence from that. And it's essentially, this is going to sound bad. I don't want to say it like this, but I think it's when people make the bodily argument with when it comes to abortion, it's kind of flipped, because the baby didn't consent to be there. So she engaged in an act that forced the baby to be dependent on her, and I think she would be responsible for that. And that'd be my argument against the bodily autonomy argument. Third one, you said when it came to the states, again, that just wouldn't right, just because some states have it legal. This is the legal argument. Some states have it legal, some other states don't have it legal. I don't think that it ever rise to the justification for abortion to happen. And it's unfair to the father. Again, if the father engages in consensual casual sex, he consents to the responsibility and the natural consequences from getting a woman pregnant. So that's how I would dispute those. But yeah, it was fun, man. I didn't want to stay on this long, but I got to run here. But
yeah, for sure. I mean, I could refute. We could go back and I could go through.
Yeah,
everything. But yeah, that would drag this out for another 20 minutes. I know you mentioned
right.
That, So yeah, I'll let you get going. But yeah, man, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Thanks, bro.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Okay, so let's. There's 3 people backstage. I'll post the link again. So that anyone else wants to come on. But first, let me take a piss, because we've been going for an hour and a half. All right, I'm back. Let's do this shit. Let me bring on the next person. Oh man, we have so many people. Okay. I gotta try to keep this more short per person. Hello. Junior, hello.
I was
Hello?
muted. My bad, bro.
Okay. Yeah.
Let me see if he gets. Hey, man, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Pretty good. Yeah, you want to kind of kick it off? Where are you at in terms of this issue?
First, I don't want to get into the other guys' debate, but I have to start with that whole hypocrisy thing. So, what was up with that? Well, how was he being a hypocrite in saying that it's the responsibility of, like,
Because his position is that it's irresponsible to engage in sex unless you already have a child. He also, at the same time, acknowledged that most women that he fucks are not ready to have a child, and they would not be able to have a child because if it wasn't for him, right? Because he's, you need two people to play. He's acknowledged that you generally, you want to be responsible. So he says that you want to be responsible, but he's being irresponsible by fucking these chicks who are not ready to have kids.
But they are allowing that. They have intention. Their intention may not be the same, but that doesn't change the outcome. They know the outcome which can occur. So,
sure, but it takes two to tango, right?
Yeah,
so,
and he said he's accepting that, and she must accept that too if she's engaging in the act,
Right, but if he knows, okay, again, if he knows that the woman is not ready to have a kid, and again, you need two people to have a baby, and he thinks it's irresponsible to have sex without having a kid. He knows that she's not ready to have a kid. Then he's contributing to that irresponsibility by having sex with her, right? Then he should, if he wants to be responsible, then he should actually be avoiding casual sex, at least with women who are not ready for the consequences.
But she knows the consequences too, though. She should not allow that. She says, if I'm saying I'm not allowed, like I'm controlling my own body, so is that woman. If she says, okay, I'm gonna allow this to happen, even though the potential consequence, like me drinking, like if someone gives me drinks, I could potentially die, but I accept the consequences, knowing that's not my intention. But I accept it if someone is giving me drinks, I'm choosing to drink.
Right, but this would be more like if you think that drinking is very irresponsible, and then you're giving drinks to people.
Well, yeah. Well, is it not responsible to have like casual sex, not knowing the consequences? Like if you're not accepting consequences of what can happen in a situation.
His position is that it's irresponsible to have casual sex unless you're ready to have a child, right? Unless you're in a position where you're ready to have a kid, right?
Well, I wouldn't say ready to have a kid, but ready to accept the consequences that go with it. Like you shouldn't be having sex unless you're ready to accept the consequences that go with sex. And that doesn't even include pregnancy. It includes diseases, includes what else ever could happen like that.
Right, but most girls have not accepted that consequence. Like everyone knows that.
You have to accept that consequence if you're having sex, because that's what comes with sex. Like those things can happen.
I agree. You should accept those consequences, but it doesn't change the fact that most women, people in general, haven't accepted that consequence.
It doesn't matter. You doing the act is accepting it. It doesn't matter if my intention wasn't to do this. I accepted an act that can do that.
No, you haven't accepted the consequences just by the virtue of doing that. That's like saying, oh, like if you I don't know, like if you drank and drive, you accepted the consequences of going to jail. Like, no, quite often you didn't. You thought you were going to be able to get away with it, right? Should you? Yes, absolutely. If you're going to drink and drive, you should accept the consequences that you could get DUI and wind up in jail. Just like if you have sex, you should. But most people, that doesn't change the fact that they haven't accepted those consequences by the virtue. And again, he is contributing to that by having sex with her. Now, just to be clear, I think there's nothing wrong with having lots of casual sex. I do it all the time. I just don't believe that like you're being irresponsible by having casual sex if you're not ready to have a kid.
I do, because that's a potential consequence. Like I'm down for casual sex, but like, if that happens, that's a potential side effect of that happening. You're like, fuck it, I'm going to do this anyway. Like drink and drive. You said that. Okay. Fuck it. It's a potential consequence that I can go to that. Well, like I have other options. I could just not do that. I can not drink and drive, right? I could just get a taxi, do something else, or I can just not have sex because I'm not ready to accept the consequences of what could happen. It's being irresponsible. It's like either in both examples, being irresponsible now and knowing, like.
Right. Again, there's a difference between should have, and what is reality. And the reality is vast majority of people have sex. They have not accepted the consequences of there being a potential life form, right? They just have not accepted that. So if you believe that it's irresponsible to have casual sex without accepting that, then if you want to be intellectually consistent, you at the very least have to sit down with a girl before you fuck her and be like, hey, by the way, you do know that there's like a 1% chance this condom might break, right? But
but women know that, unless women have not known that. Like women do know that. Do women not know that?
I mean,
like,
you do know that most women are really delusional, right?
But no, the women not know that though. Do women not know there's a 1% chance that she could get pregnant by having sex with me?
Yeah, a lot of women aren't even thinking that. When they're having sex, they just think, oh, he's wearing a condom, I'll be safe.
All right, it doesn't matter if they're thinking that in the moment. Do they know that? Do they know that if they have sex?
Well, sex is a decision that's made in the moment. Usually, it's not.
Yes,
it's not
but
premeditated.
still, like, doesn't matter if something done in the moment, like, because there's consequences that happen after. In the moment, I might think it's a good idea to rob a bank, but if I do it, it's because it's in the moment. I did it. It's just, you have like you're thinking about the consequences. You have to think about the consequences. That's part of being responsible. Think about the consequences of what could happen before, and it doesn't.
Here's what's going on. So you're arguing for what should happen. And I agree with you. Yes, you're right. I think all those things should be happening. But I'm talking about what is happening. And most women and just people in general, when they have casual sex, they're not thinking, oh, there's a small chance that this could lead to life. It's not going through their head. They're in full denial that could happen.
So you're saying that if people do things that they know could potentially have consequences, they shouldn't be able to accept those consequences. They're like, okay, no, I should get a jail out of free card because of that.
No, not at all. I think that you have no choice but to accept the consequences. What I'm saying that is, if you think same thing, if you think that drinking is wrong, then it's a little hypocritical for you to give drinks to people. Just in the same token, if you think that having casual sex, unless you're to have a kid, is wrong, and you know that the woman that you're having sex with hasn't accepted that consequence, then by fucking her, you're being a little bit hypocritical. That's my whole point. Because without you, she would have never been able to have that kid, which she's not ready for. I understand she should take responsibility. I agree with that, but that's just not what's happening vast majority of the time. Hello? Did I lose you? Hello? Hello? Let me just quickly, Alex, you don't think a woman should be self-aware of pregnancy in the argument, but not for making her decisions, being coerced, but saying no? No, I think a lot of people are misinterpreting my argument. I totally think that people should accept responsibility. I'm just not, I think that if you think, okay, let me clarify this one last time. If you think that a woman, that you should not engage, it's irresponsible to engage in sex if you're not ready to have a kid, and the woman you're fucking is not ready to have a kid, and you fuck her without at least bringing this up to her, then you're being a little hypocritical and you're contributing to their responsibility. That's all. Okay, we lost him. Let's bring on the next person. We got someone who wants to show their face. Okay, let me just prioritize him. Hello.
Hey, Alex.
What's up, man?
Hey, so real quick, I think that it would be smart if you limited these to like 10 minutes each. That way, because it's so frustrating to wait for a really long time and then finally get in here. So
yeah, but then I have to cut people off, which I hate doing. So it's like,
well, you could it's like, say when you get past the 10-minute mark, you each make like a short closing statement and then you go on to the next guy. I think that would be good.
Yeah, perhaps.
So anyway, I am here to, whenever you go into a debate, you have to clarify.
We lost your audio.
To clarify what exactly your position is going into it. So I am here to argue to you that the cutoff point should be conception. Anything prior to conception, it's okay to stop the process because it's not life yet. Anything after conception, it's not okay to stop the process. So I'm trying to convince you that the cutoff point should be conception. What are you trying to convince me that the cutoff point should be?
I like I said, I don't have a hard line in the sand, but I think 3 to 4 months is pretty reasonable.
Well, I would say you have no ground to stand on then if you don't have a point. Like, what are you trying to convince me of?
Okay, first of all, I'm not trying to convince you personally of anything, right? Where the whole point is to provide content to do a debate. I know I'm not going to change anyone's minds who is debating me. That's not how debate works. It's usually to make a good point for the audience. So I'm what my position is that I'm okay with going back to what Roe versus Wade left it off at, which I believe was like 3 to 4 months. It was like abortion was federally protected until a certain point, which I think was 3 to 4 months, and then after that, the protection didn't apply. So I'm saying that's a pretty reasonable standard. Let's go back to that. That's my argument.
So if we say 3 months, that's about 90 days, right? So tell me, why is it that a baby or fetus, whatever you want to call the organism at that time, why is it that a baby at 91 days deserves to live, but a baby at 90 days deserves to die?
Because you need to set a cutoff point somewhere, right? So you can't like, yes, I get that argument, but that line has to be somewhere, right? It's not like there's not a big difference between 90 days and 91 days. But then if we set it to 91 days, then it's like, well, why is it okay 91 days, 92 lines? So we really need to set it at somewhere. Like if you want to set it at sentience, which happens at I believe 4 months in, then you can set it there. If you want to set it at, I don't know, like a little bit earlier, that's fine too. But we do have to draw the line in the sand somewhere.
So how about conception? That's a very definitive line that I'm proposing to you. Every other line that you give, it's like it's arbitrary. You can't really tell. How do you know when it's sentient or not? Like what I'm giving you is what I'm offering is a definitive point, and you're not able to offer that in return. So I would say because of that, your argument is invalid.
No, because no, you don't need a definitive point to argue that that the line in the sand that you draw is way too early, right? Okay, fine. If I have to pick a point, I'll just pick sentience, which happens at 4 or 5 months in. Depends which study you go off on. So I'll just go pick that line. I don't really think that matters to the argument because my argument is that your line in the sand is way too early.
So, okay, so sentience, that's your line. So any being that's not sentient, it's okay to kill them. That's what you're saying.
Not that it's morally like okay. It's just that that's where I think the law should be. Yeah.
Okay, then, I mean, I'm sure you've heard the person in a coma comparison. They're not sentient at that time. They will be soon. So is it okay to just walk in there and chop their head off?
We actually allow that. We allow the family to put someone in a coma. We actually do allow the family to pull the plug on them.
Do we allow that for, like, let's say the doctor says, hey, I think they're going to live, they're going to make it through this, and then the family says, pull the plug. Is that legal?
I think it depends on what exactly the prognosis is, and I think it also depends on the state. But generally speaking, when people are in comas that don't seem to be ending soon, I think we do allow. I mean, there's a lot of nuance to it. It depends on the state. It depends on like a whole bunch of factors. But generally speaking, in certain circumstances, when people are in a coma, we do allow the family to pull the plug. I'm not saying that like I'm a big fan of that, but that's just the way the law is currently.
I would argue that it's not analogous because in this case, the child is growing, developing naturally towards the start of a beautiful life. And in that case, I highly doubt that they're allowed to just pull the plug.
Well, I'm not saying I'm definitely not saying it's analogous, but I'm just saying that, your analogy doesn't really work because we do allow people who are in comas to have the plug pulled on them under some circumstances. But I'm not saying it's an analogy right there. I'm just saying that, that counterexample doesn't work. So you have to provide me with a different one.
It does work. Like your reason for discluding it is not valid because the circumstances are very, very different in these two cases. One of them is progressing towards a natural life and is going to be fine so long as you don't interfere. The other one is suffering and is towards the very end of their life.
Right, but why? Okay, so then by that same token, why is it that if this example is very different, then why did you bring it up to prove your point?
It's similar because the sentience part of it is what makes it similar.
Okay, so I'm going through. So you're saying, well, what about in the case of someone having a coma? I'm bringing the point that this analogy doesn't work. So I agree with you that this analogy is very different, but I'm saying that analogy doesn't work because again, we do as a society allow people to pull the plug on people in a coma under certain circumstances. I agree with you. That's different.
Not
but
because
that's
of inconvenience. Like the vast majority of abortions happen because of, it's just like, and this is according to Planned Parenthood, by the way, is that the vast majority of them are because of inconvenience, just because they did not want to have this person in their life. And so in order for the analogy to be completely similar, analogous, it would have to be a situation where the family says, yes, this person in a coma is going to live. They're going to be fine. But
you brought up that
we just don't
analogy,
want
not me. I agree with you that analogy is different. But you brought it up. Like you brought it up to kind of.
I am trying to paint a hypothetical here that where we eliminate all the variables and isolate the current issue at hand.
Okay.
And so that's what. And so I say you should grant me that. Grant me let's say it's a situation where the family wants to pull the plug simply because of their inconvenience. So it's inconvenience with the abortion, inconvenience with the person in the coma. And in both cases, like, is it okay to, like, in both cases, they're not sentient. Say the fetus is not sentient yet. And so is it okay for the family to pull the plug because of inconvenience? It sounds like you're saying, well, I guess let me get that answer first.
I'm saying basically what you were saying earlier, which is it's a very different situation, which doesn't apply. So I could have the situations are too different for them to be analogous.
What's the huge difference here? I'm trying to, like I said, I'm trying to isolate the variables at hand here. And so I'm painting a picture where it's a person in a coma who is going to live. The doctor says they're naturally going to live. They're going to be fine. And the family says, well, because having this person in our life would inconvenience us. So we want to just go ahead and pull the plug for that reason. Well, only because of inconvenience.
Yeah, there's many differences. One is that person who's in a coma can survive independent outside of the womb of the mother, right? So if the mother wants to like completely part ways and like fly across the world, she can do that. Versus in the case of the fetus, that thing cannot survive across outside of the mom's womb. Another one is a heartbeat. I mean, there's so many things that are different.
But like I said, I'm trying to paint a picture here, a hypothetical that isolates the issue at hand. What was I wanted to say something in response to the first point that you had made on that. Can you, what was like, how did you start that? You said, oh, it's not the same because like about a heartbeat or something?
I said that because I said that the first point was that it could survive outside of the mother's womb, right? So for example, the mother and the father could be like, yo, fuck this shit, I'm out, right? And that whatever, the person in a coma could survive given the medical technology, blah, 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 versus the fetus, no, it cannot survive outside the mom's womb. It's directly reliant on the mother for survival.
Okay, so like I said, I do want to, I respect all the other guys waiting. So, and I wanted to bring up one other point before I left, but how about we both make one more point? I want to say one more thing on this and then I'll let you have the last word. And then I want to move on to like my last issue.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to stay on a little bit longer, I'm cool with that. I mean, I think this is an interesting discussion. So, like, you don't have to bounce if you don't want to.
Yeah, but I mean, I have respect for your fan base. I have respect for all the guys out there that are, taking the time to improve themselves and their lives. And I want everybody to get their turn in here. But
I think either way, that's not going to happen. There's like 8 people backstage and it's like 10 p.m. So either way, I'm only going to get small. But go ahead.
Like I said, 10 minutes each. And then you cut it off. You each have your closing statements. And then even you could even make it to where you always get the last word. You know what I mean?
I'm not going to do like weird debate tactics. But I think the problem with that is you just don't get into like a really deep discussion. But okay, anyway, go ahead.
You said the difference was that in this situation, the person could survive. Like basically, you're saying that they're autonomous, so they can survive like outside the womb.
Yes.
And then I would have to say, okay, well then you would have, is a child who is able to survive in an incubator, do they deserve to live more than a fetus who could not survive in an incubator?
Sure. I think there's different levels of life. So I think that's a higher level of life.
Well, I mean, this might come down to just personal. I did say I'd let you have the last word on that, but I think
go ahead. You can make a retort. Go ahead.
I think that all life is precious, and like from the moment of conception all the way until death.
But do you think there's different levels of life?
No.
So you would say like
superiority of life. One human being is superior to another, is what you're saying.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah. Like you would acknowledge that human beings are superior to like cows, right?
Yes.
Okay, so but cows are alive, right? But we are superior to them, right? Why are we superior to them? Because we have consciousness, right?
How does that disprove my point here that I'm defending is that all human life is equally I forgot the word you used. You said like I don't agree with like
Superior, valuable, yeah.
yeah, valuable. All human life is equally valuable from conception all the way up until death.
Right. Well, I'm just trying to understand your logic. So, like, that's why I'm asking. What makes like why are human beings more valuable than cows or raccoons?
Mhm. Yeah, this is a good argument. It goes into my religion. That's like the base of that. The reason why I believe in what the Bible says. And yeah, you could call me a human chauvinist, and that I just value human life over animal lives. Let me ask you, like, if you could save either one human little girl or 5 pigs from a burning building, you can only choose one or the other. Would you save
Yeah, I think
5
human
pigs?
life is vastly superior to animals. So I do, but I definitely think that human life is superior to animals. Otherwise, I'd be a hypocrite because I eat steak all the time. Aside from religion, I just want to figure out why you think that human life is superior to animal life. For me, the reason is I would say consciousness, right? We know that we're alive. I would say, yeah, like that's like the big one for me is consciousness and sentience, right? So I want
How
to
do
figure
you
out.
know the animals aren't conscious and sentient?
Well, I guess like, do they know that they're like, okay, maybe they are conscious, but we are definitely a much higher level of consciousness because we've been able to, create so much. We've been able to.
Survival of the fittest.
We're not necessarily the fittest from an evolution perspective. We're just the smartest. We're definitely the smartest, but we're not the fittest. A lot of animals, we're actually pretty weak as a species compared to our size.
Okay. Is it okay if we go over to my other point that I wanted to make?
Sure. I mean, I would still like to get like a clear answer on that one, though. Like,
what's the question?
The question is, why do you think humans are superior to cows?
And why are you allowed to just throw my religion out the window? I gave you an answer.
Because religion is not like I mean, I don't know how to say this nicely, because religion is like your personal belief. It's not based in any kind of fact or logic.
I mean, I think there's a lot of I've done a lot of research. I've been very skeptical for many years, and I've studied like historical facts about about Jesus and whatnot. And you can laugh, but I watched a lot of debates on it, and I haven't been convinced of atheism. But anyway,
Well, I'm not an atheist.
I don't think you can throw that reasoning out the window. I gave you my answer. That's
then I could say my religion is that a fetus is that, according to my religion, it's not a baby until it's 5 months in. I could just flip that same argument.
I don't judge any religion out there for following what they believe to be true. Like I won't go into a detail on that, but because
the final point I would make is we have a separation of church and state in America, right? So even if you believe that according to religion it's wrong, that shouldn't really affect government policy.
And I'll just say, okay, I'm a human chauvinist.
But like, why? Like, why are humans superior to animals? I'm a human chauvinist too, but why? For me, it's sentience. What is it for you?
Mm-hmm. I don't have I mean, again, I don't think you should be allowed to just throw my answer out. But other than that, I guess I didn't come here prepared with a good answer, and I'll have to like get back to you on that.
Okay.
I'm not gonna like double down and try to make up some argument on the spot. I'm just gonna say, yeah, I don't have another reason for that to present right now.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm asking that question is because I think it's a very interesting to the previous line of discussion, which is like, are all life the same, or is there superiority? So if we can acknowledge that humans are superior to animals, right, then we can acknowledge that all humans maybe are not the same thing also, that there's difference amongst our race, at the very least between
no way.
Okay, well, let me finish. Between a 1 week old bag of whatever genetics and like a breathing, living baby, like we can say that they're both very important, right, and precious. But I think you'd be hard pressed to say that one is not more valuable than the other. Like one is not more conscious than the other. One is not more sentient than the other.
That was kind of just fluff, really. It's like, oh, I think one is more valuable than the other. Like, you're not telling me why.
Because of sentience, because of consciousness, because of independence.
but one of them has like potential sentience, potential consciousness. They're going to be just as that person has potential to grow up and be just as great of a person as the one who's already been developed.
Sure, assuming that the mother doesn't die, assuming that it's not stillbirth, assuming a list of things that probably won't happen but could happen. So at the very least, we can say, like, let's just assume that, I don't know, that the mother, if a woman gets pregnant, that there's a 90% chance the baby will arrive, then we would have to be, according to that logic, would be like, okay, well, then this is 90% as valuable as a real baby because there's a 10% chance it would not have even been born. If we're going, it just depends what metric you use. If we're going off independence, it's like, well, this is not nearly as independent as as a baby can be. If we're going off like sentience and feelings, so it just depends on what metric you use.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, again, I think okay, maybe you did give me a definitive cutoff point that you're defending here, which is 90 days. I think you said.
Yeah,
but
I'm flexible between 90 days and like 4 or 5 months.
Okay. I would say, why is it that I don't find you like, oh, there has to be a cutoff point reasoning to be a valid answer for why a fetus, whatever you want to call it, at 91 days deserves to live and a fetus at 90 days deserves to die.
Yeah, there's no easy answers with that one. I mean, I think we have to
conception. That's the answer.
Right, according to your perspective, but it's like if we literally for everything we need a reasonable cutoff point. Like, why is it that like if someone has, let's just say, over 28 grams of weed, they get charged a felony, but someone who has 27 grams, they get charged a misdemeanor and get treated completely differently by the legal system? It's just like we have to draw the line somewhere, and we agree that basically having a large amount of weed should be, or drugs in general, because I'm pro weed, should be punishable than having like a little baggie, right? And we just decide to draw the standard there. It's like the same thing here. You can make that literally with any kind of law and legislation. It's like, why is the limit there? Why wasn't it 1 day, 1 gram, 1 hour in the other direction, right? That's literally any legislation, but you do need to have reason. You do need to draw the line somewhere. So that would literally like work for any type of legislation.
Well, I'd say it's very different because we're talking about somebody who committed a crime versus somebody who's just completely innocent growing up in the womb. And also it's like felony versus misdemeanor we're talking about. And I mean, weed, the vast majority of weed sentences are very, very low. I think it's pretty rare for there to be somebody who's in jail for weed.
Well, that's actually not true. There's a whole bunch of people in jail for weed. It's actually
You've probably been swayed by like anecdotal, like extreme examples of like, I'll admit BS.
No, there's a whole bunch of statistics on this. People, I can pull it up right now, not to get too off topic, but I'll pull it up while you make your next point.
Okay, my next point is your argument about the crime drop. Yesterday, you were debating somebody and you said there was a huge crime drop in the 90s, and you said that is because of Roe v. Wade. First of all, you cannot definitively say that. Economists have been studying the 90s crime drop ever since it happened, and it's still inconclusive. They're still debating that to this day, like why exactly did that happen? And there are a lot of different reasons proposed because, yeah, I get that you're saying, oh, it happened because of Roe v. Wade. That would be assuming that all of those children were predestined to grow up and become criminals. Like they had no chance of turning being educated and growing up to, just be good people, for lack of a better term. And then also, there is a much stronger correlation between mass incarceration and the decrease in crime in terms of an inverse correlation. Now, I understand correlation is not causation, but I read a lot of articles about this, and I used to actually go around saying that policing and mass incarceration caused the 90s crime drop, but actually looking back on it now and reading articles, I see that it's widely disputed, but you definitely cannot definitively say that it was because of Roe v. Wade.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just quickly. So I just looked up the marijuana thing. So currently, right now, there's 40,000 Americans incarcerated for weed possession. Right. So that's like 40,000 more than there should be. Okay. Anyway, let's
yes.
Going back to what you were saying. Yes, you cannot definitively prove that. That's not how statistics work. You can't definitively prove anything with statistics, right? Because you need to know what would have happened if Roe versus Wade wasn't passed, and there's no way we can know that, right? Because it did pass, right? So you can't really definitively prove anything with statistics. We just have to look at patterns, right? And patterns that make sense and patterns that don't make sense. But if your argument is like you can't 100% prove that Roe versus Wade caused the crime drop, I would say, yes, you're right. I can't definitively prove it, but I can prove it to a very reasonable point.
No, because there's a much stronger correlation between mass incarceration and the crime drop.
I mean, have you gone through the book Freakonomics? Did you go through? Okay, yeah. I mean, I think that would be like a good starting point. But yeah, it's been a minute since I read it. But I was researching this today. There is a bit of dispute about that, but it's not significant. The majority of economists do agree with the Freakonomics argument that that it was at least largely related to the drop off in crime. The fact, and it logically makes sense, because if you think about like who are people who want to get an abortion, people who don't want to have a kid, people who are more likely to be negligent, right? And we know that negligent parents do lead to higher chance of the kid winding up quote unquote bad. So logically it makes sense, statistically it makes sense. I mean, yeah, I think that we can argue to which degree it made a difference, but I think largely speaking, from a logical and a statistical perspective, it makes sense.
Okay, this leads me into my last question, actually. So it sounds like you're trying to paint a picture here where you say that because of the likelihood of these children growing up and being in a low-income home and committing crimes, that justifies aborting them.
Well, it's one of my many arguments, right? It's part of my argument. That's not my sole argument, and in fact, it's probably not even my biggest argument. It's just one of the arguments.
Okay, well then I would ask you, does that same logic apply to a 1-year-old child growing up in a low-income home? They are also statistically very likely to grow up and become criminals, according to your logic. So you'd have to support going through all the low-income households and killing all the 1-year-olds.
No, because this is again like I said, this is part of like many arguments. It's not my strongest one. So if that was my only argument, then you would be correct, and I would have to justify that. But it's not. It's only like a small part of the picture. My main argument has to do with more freedom. That's what I care about a little bit more than the macroeconomics, which really, like, to me personally, freedom is like one of the highest virtues. Like to me, like macroeconomic, I'm going to be rich either way, not going to really affect me. So yeah, I don't care as much about that.
Okay, but you acknowledge that that's a good retort to your argument about the crime drop.
I think it's a decent retort. I think it would be totally valid if that was my only argument, is like, we got to do what's best in terms of the macroeconomics, right? If that was my sole argument, that yes, that would be a really, really good retort. It's just not. That's just like a small part of the picture.
But if I'm targeting that argument, I've eliminated that argument. You can't use the crime drop anymore.
No, well, because again, so my whole thing is that with overturned Roe versus Wade, I think that the cons outweigh the pros, right? So the pro is that we're potentially saving, unborn babies, and the cons are all the things that I've been arguing for, right? The cons outweigh the pros. When you have a 1-year-old baby, then I would argue, if you want to kill it for the sake of economics, well, the pros would outweigh the cons in that situation. I guess wordage just flip, but basically the argument would be like, no, yes, sure, you might be able to prevent crime by killing a 1-year-old child, but all the negatives of doing that would be outweighed, right? So the scale would be balanced in the other direction.
Why is it that all the negatives are outweighed of killing the 1-year-old child, but not like a child at 8 months that is about to be born?
Well, I'm not for aborting children who are 8 months. Like I want to draw the line way before that.
Okay. So, I mean, even if it's like inconvenient, all these arguments you've been making throughout all these debates, inconvenience to the mother, it's not fair, the crime drop is another point. You'd throw all of that out the window if the child was at 8 months.
Yes, I think at that point, the cons, I think at that point, I keep getting confused with the words, the cons of aborting a child are outweighed by the pros of keeping the child. So yes, I think that at that point, it's already gone too far. That baby has sentience. It has a heartbeat. It might even survive outside the womb. At that point, even though all the macro stuff still applies, even though the freedom stuff still applies, it's being outweighed by the by the con of killing something that's sentient and could survive outside the womb.
Okay, so last question then. Your whole argument seems to be based around the whole like, do the pros outweigh the cons argument.
Sure.
So then you must really believe then that the pros outweigh the cons at 91 days, but not at 90 days.
Well, like I've addressed that several times. Again, it's an arbitrary line that we have to draw in the sand somewhere, because again, you have to draw the line somewhere. We can't
conception.
Right, but my argument is that that's way too early to draw the line there.
Well, I don't think that you have a good argument for why the pros outweigh the cons. It sounds like you're not explaining why the pros outweigh the cons at 91 days, but not 90 days, because your retort to that, your response to that is to say we have to draw the line somewhere. That's not the same thing as that. Oh no, the pros definitely outweigh the cons there.
I don't think there's a big difference between 91 days and 90 days, right? I actually probably there's not any kind of a difference, or it's very negligible. So I'm not arguing. So I think you're misinterpreting my argument. My argument isn't like it 100% has to be at 90 days and we cannot make it 91 days. We cannot make it 89 days. No, my argument is that we need to draw the point somewhere. And I think somewhere before sentience is a reasonable stopping point. Right, that's my argument. I'm not hardcore advocating for 90 days. If they change Roe versus Wade to be 89 days instead of 90 days, I would be happy with that. Like I wouldn't really care about that.
Okay. I mean, I disagree mainly because of like that I value human life at every stage the same. But I just want to say I think that you cannot use your crime drop argument anymore going forward.
Why?
Because I mean, you've admitted that you don't have your only response to it was to say, oh, well, that's not my only argument. I have all these other arguments, but I've given a reason why that argument's not valid.
No, you've given me a contradiction that would exist if you haven't disproved the argument and said, oh, actually, this is why this argument is false. You just give me a potential contradiction that would exist if that was my only argument. But I'm saying that contradiction doesn't exist because it's not my only argument. Yes, I agree with you that would be a contradiction if that was my only argument. But it doesn't disprove the argument or dismiss it in any way. It's just a potential contradiction. It doesn't even really exist.
I'm not seeing the link here in terms of why it eliminates the argument if it's the only argument, but it doesn't eliminate it if there are other arguments.
It doesn't.
I'm isolating that argument.
Yeah, it doesn't eliminate it. It's a logical contradiction. Then it doesn't eliminate it. It would be a logical contradiction because it's like, okay, well, Alex values macro above all else, but then if he doesn't believe in killing 1-year-olds, then he doesn't really value macroeconomics above all else. So it's not a dismissal of the argument. It's a logical contradiction. Those two things are different.
I think that logical contradictions prove arguments to be false or invalid.
No, that's not the same thing because for example, the statistics I mentioned could very much be true that like there's a 50% drop off in violent crime with Roe versus Wade, right? That could be statistically true, but then if that's my only argument, I could be in a logical contradiction if I don't believe that we should kill 1-year-olds if that causes a drop off in crime.
Yeah, not gonna lie, I'm trying to understand your reasoning here, and I'm just not. So I think this is a good time to go on to the next person. Thank you.
Yeah,
thanks for holding this open discussion. And I still think that you can't use that crime drop argument anymore. That's my final word.
Well, no, I mean, you can definitely, you can have I think you're confusing, and I guess this can be kind of confusing, a premise being invalid and a logical contradiction, and they may seem similar. I get that, but they're not the same thing. So the only way you could say I can't use that argument is if you find something that invalidates that argument, meaning like, yo, I found this statistic that's, says something opposite, or whatever logical reason you gave that invalidates the argument. But you haven't invalidated the argument of itself. You've just pointed a potential logical contradiction that could exist, right? So those two things are different. I understand that part can be confusing. I get that. Yeah, like I've been taking logic classes, but if it wasn't for that, I might be confused by that too. But yeah, those two things are like different. But yeah.
Cool. All right. Take care.
All right. Cool. Thanks for coming on, dude. Take care. All right. Let's do like one more person. Yeah, let's do like one more because it's already like 10:18. Okay, let's see what else. I mean, this guy has been waiting forever. Okay, let me have him on. Yo.
Yo, what's up?
Oh man, your audio is like.
Oh, wait. I turned off the fan because it's scorching in here. Is that better? Wait. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
all right, let's go from the start then. So let's start by defining moral properties. Okay, so when it comes to pro-life, there are two categories of the discussion. Purely, I agree with you. The appointment of the Supreme Justices clearly have other motivations when they overturned a precedent that was standing since 1973. It's been affirmed so many times throughout jurisprudence. It's clearly it's a political decision. It's not a legal decision by any stretch of the
Cool.
But there are two dimensions. There's a practical dimension and there's a moral dimension. So the practical dimension is like you were talking about, the macroeconomic dimensions, and also the crime-related dimensions. So when they overturned abortion rights in Colombia, we already saw the repercussions of this. It's a fucking disaster. This is pretty clear.
Okay. Interesting. I didn't even know about that, but thank you for bringing it up.
Basically, black market abortions increased tenfold. It was a huge.
Okay. I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna use that talking point. Okay. Thank you.
It's a good one. And also it puts the mother at risk as well, because the sanitary conditions of black market abortions is just way worse.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the moral dimension. So when it comes to being pro-life, the last guy, he was kind of getting there, but he just didn't close it out correctly.
Okay.
So basically what's going on is, when you have a discussion about sentience, we need to define what exactly gives sentience moral consideration, right? So my argument is that the only reason human life has any value at all is because they have the potential to respect social contracts, okay? So, for instance, I wouldn't kill you because I wouldn't want to be killed. So I respect your freedoms and your liberties because I want you to respect mine.
No,
Okay.
can I just interject something? According to that logic, autistic people would be not sentient because they don't understand social contracts.
I'm not referring to sentience. I'm referring to a general trend, and that's why we go by rules. So I would be a support of. Have you heard of rule utilitarianism before?
No.
Okay, so it's basically a moral system that sets out that we live by rules that are of general application to humans, right? So when you calculate utility or moral worth, no human is capable of making perfect calculations. So ideally, let's say that we had two massive catastrophes, right? We had a burning building and we had a mass shooting. Okay, but let's say we had two catastrophes, right?
Okay.
And I could only stop one, but I could stop one, right? But I didn't know how many people were involved in each. So I couldn't make a perfect calculation, right? So instead of making a perfect calculation, because I just don't have that information, I live by rules which dictate risk to myself and risk to others, to both parties who are involved. So in this case, the mass shooting would probably be more dangerous to me and also more dangerous to the people around me. So I would prioritize going and saving the people in the burning building, right? So rule utilitarianism, it bases itself on rule sets that allow you to maximize utility or moral value. That's what the idea is.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So basically, the potential to respect for an autistic person. So generally speaking, yes, or a sociopath wouldn't respect my social contract, maybe, right? But the rule says that most people will. So I will follow that rule because that, generally speaking, will lead to better outcomes for society as a whole, right? You get what I'm saying?
Yes, but I'm a little confused about how this ties into the Roe versus Wade thing.
Yeah. Okay. I'll get to that point. Okay. So, for children, right? Sentience as a moral property doesn't give any moral consideration. It doesn't make any sense. It's a completely arbitrary characteristic. Like the guy who was talking about earlier with the person in the coma, right? He doesn't have sentience, right? But we still afford him moral consideration, right? So, because even though you said that you said, right, as I understand it, that you weren't in favor of pulling the plug on coma patients, morally speaking, right?
I mean, I think it depends on the circumstance and like if they have a chance of surviving or not. I mean, like I think there's a lot of factors. If someone has like 0% chance of surviving, I think it should be left up to the family and it might be justified.
Okay, so let's say that there's a reasonable chance that the patient might recover. Is it justified to pull the plug and kill him?
I think, in my opinion, no.
No, exactly, right? But he's not sentient. You still grant him moral consideration, because otherwise you wouldn't care about that at all.
Yes, I think sentient. Yeah, okay, I see your point. Yeah, I think sentience is, well, I guess we don't really know if he feels things let's just assume when he's in a coma, he can't feel anything, right?
I don't think that's a reasonable assumption. But we can take that assumption if you want.
Oh, okay. So you think when they're in the coma that they can feel things?
There have been certain medical observations that like the emotion center sometimes activates in the brain. Whether that's perceived or not, I don't know.
So then it wouldn't invalidate my argument then, because sentience is the ability to perceive and feel things, right? So
but whether that feeling is perceived by the brain or not, as in a conscious state, is completely unknown. So we don't know. Right, but there are other states of like complete unconsciousness.
Well, if they can feel things, then they are sentient.
Yeah, but so like, what would you say that the ability to feel something is? Is that just the release of the chemical in your brain? Is that feeling something? Because in that case, animals would be just as sentient as we are.
Right.
Because I think that feeling, I mean, in sentience in the nature of
animals are definitely as sentient as humans. I think there's other factors at play, but yeah, I think animals.
What factors is it that grant humans moral consideration, animals not, besides sentience?
Oh, we're talking specifically for humans and animals.
Yeah, I mean, any example. Basically, I'm trying to show you that like sentience isn't actually something that grants anybody any moral consideration. Like that's pretty obvious. Well, it's very arbitrary.
I think that's definitely an opinion. I think sentience is one of the many things that matters, but it's definitely.
What are the other things that matter?
I think it's more cruel to kill something that can feel it versus kill something that can't feel it. Would you agree with me on that?
No.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think those things have any relevance.
Okay, so you would say it's like equally as wrong to kill something that can't feel it at all versus something that feels it like really entirely?
Absolutely.
Okay, because to me that's like different levels of wrong right there. I think that it's like more fucked up to kill something that can feel it versus like for example, like I don't know, like fucking killing a dog is like so much worse than like killing I don't know, like a fucking like an ant or something like that because it like barely feels.
But is like you said you've been taking logic classes, right, Alex?
Yes. Yeah, mildly, yeah.
Okay, so would you say that assertion is based on logic, or would you say it's based on your empathic connection to dogs because you acknowledge them as beings that bring you pleasure? If we're going just logically speaking here, what is it about a dog?
Well, okay, I'll rephrase it. I think it's more wrong to like kill a cow than it is to kill an ant.
Okay, why?
Because the cow has a more ability to feel things. It's a higher life form. It has more.
How do you define a higher life form?
How do you define higher life form? That's a good question. I guess higher life form would be. Yeah, that's an interesting question. How would I define higher life form? I think I would define it as like what it can and can't accomplish.
So, I'm sorry. Do you mean potential? Like potential of accomplishment? How do you measure accomplishment?
Well, I mean, like,
would you say, for instance, that a disabled person who has less like potential of accomplishment is less valuable inherently than a person who's not disabled?
Honestly, this may be like kind of fucked up, but I do think it's an interesting question. I like. The way I've thought about it, and again, this is like going to be fucked up, but whatever. I'll say. I don't think all humans have the same intrinsic value, which is something that a lot of people believe. Like we can't compare someone like Elon Musk to someone who's like whatever, like a drug using like criminal, right? Like they're just not the same in terms of their intrinsic value, in my opinion. So do I think...
Sorry, Alex, we're using a load of terms here, so we need to clarify these as we go along. So when you say intrinsic value, like what are you actually referring to here? Are you referring to value they provide to society as a whole? Because in that case, you are probably correct. But value from a moral standpoint, how will you defend killing... Let's say just for the sake of argument, how would you defend killing somebody over somebody else, like from a moral standpoint? Are we supposed to measure their like societal value before we decide who to kill? Is that what your opinion is? If we have a choice,
that obviously would not be practical, and it would be highly subjective.
No, we're not talking about practical. We're talking about morals right now. We're talking about an ethical perspective.
What is the question? Say that again.
I'm asking you whether we should measure people's social value, like their value to society, in deciding who should be prioritized. So let's say that we have a construction worker, okay? Construction workers who do, they do what they do, right? But like they provide mostly like financial benefits, I guess. They build buildings, that's nice, sure. But let's say that we have a construction worker and a doctor, okay? A doctor who saves the lives of patients.
Yeah.
So he, in my opinion at least, would perform, I guess, more of a valuable societal function, right?
Yeah.
So does that mean that, let's say, they both end up in the hospital, right? Should we just say, you know what, we should always prioritize the doctor in this case because he provides a higher social value than the construction.
Assuming we have very limited, we only have like one heart for a heart transplant.
I guess if you want to take that angle.
Ideally, we save both people. Like, why would we?
Yeah, of course, yeah. But if you have the choice, you have to make a choice.
We have to pick one because of limited resources, right?
For instance, yes.
Yeah, I would say probably save the doctor then. Yeah.
Okay, so people, their value as moral beings is actually not determined by sentience at all. It's determined by social value in that case. That's interesting.
No, I think there's many factors. I think that's just one.
What are those factors? Because we're kind of gishgallicking all over the place now.
What exactly is the question? What is the?
So, Alex, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to narrow down what you actually think gives moral value or moral consideration. Because you said it was sentience.
Oh, okay.
I proved that it's not sentience because you said that humans are even though they're equally sentient, because the construction worker and the doctor clearly equally sentient. That it actually comes down to their social value.
Okay. In that limited example where we have to make the choice, I think sentience is a factor. Like if we're taking, because at this point we're picking between two people who are sentient, right? And we have to make a decision, right? So at that point we're taking social value into account if we have to make a decision, right? But if we're taking, we have a choice between, I don't know, like something, a being that's sentient and a being that's not sentient, I would definitely prioritize the being that's sentient. Like let's say we have we can either say.
But you also don't believe that though. That's not true. Because let's say that you have a doctor, right, who's not sentient at that present time, right? But there's a good chance he will recover, right? And you have a construction worker who is sentient and is awake at that time. Right,
but that wasn't the scenario though. That would be a little different.
No. But Alex, the point I'm making here is that like when we're talking about moral qualifiers, we need to actually stay consistent with the categories that we use to qualify something as a moral property. Because we can't just say that okay. So when sentience is the determining factor, it's the only one that's relevant. But once both people have sentience, then we start looking at social value. That's very interesting.
I never said it's the only factor that matters. Right. I think there's many factors that matter, but if in this analogy or example, both of the beings were sentient, right? So that's why I utilize social value.
But
that's
why
does one being sentient and one being not being sentient, right? Like to me, if we have to to kind of answer your question, I guess, is if we have to pick between like a 2-year-old baby and a 2-month fetus, and we can only save one for some miraculous reason, even though that would never happen, I would say let's save the 2-year-old baby, right? Because that baby is sentient, right? So even though both of them have zero social value currently, right, and they both probably have the same potential for social value, at that point,
why? But this also doesn't follow, because like you say that you value sentience, but you only value sentience insofar as it follows this exact train of logic that you made right now. So whenever you were saying that whenever sentience is equal, then we can start dragging in other moral factors. But when sentience isn't equal, you still go to other factors, because in my example that I gave earlier, we already established that you said there are other factors at play. So what are you actually saying?
What example did I say? When
I was talking about the coma patient, right? And you said, oh, that's really interesting. I guess I would say that sentience, along with a bunch of other factors, are what I would consider. And Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I didn't pick the like if like the example was like if the doctor is in a coma but the construction worker is like healthy, which one to save? I didn't pick the doctor, right? I was saying
No.
like,
I realized that, but that was just to show that in a situation where the sentience isn't equal, right? Because one person has sentience and the other person doesn't have sentience, then you would still value social value, right? Because what we're trying to
it's one of the many factors. Sentience is a factor. Social value is a factor. I mean, I think there's multiple factors, but this doesn't apply when we're talking about like a fetus, right? Because a 2 month old has the same social value as a 2-year-old, right? It's still the same level of social value. So at that point, the only thing that's different between them is
why. How could you possibly say that? Let's say that the 2-year-old, right, is born into a family with loads of business connections and is like doesn't have any, like neither is predicted to have any disabilities, and like he will predictably, like going by all intergenerational wealth statistics, will have way more social value than the fetus. What about in that case?
Well, first of all, just because he has family money doesn't mean he's going to provide social.
That's one of the greatest predictors. One of the greatest predictors you have.
I mean, there's a good chance he's gonna be like a trust fund baby and shit. Like, I don't know if that's like it depends how you define social value, but him just like living off his parents' savings isn't like social value to me. That's different than like
no. But if you look at it, which people get into high standing positions in society generally, it's always high class people. People who are born into money have so many more safety nets than people who don't. This is just like very.
Yeah, I would agree to that, but just because they have more safety nets doesn't mean they're going to be have more social value. Like, I would argue that actually you probably want someone who didn't grow up with every advantage, someone who had to work hard, right? Like that was, for example, me. I came from upper middle class family, but my parents, like, I had a job when I was like 12, right? Like, I think that's a big part of the reason why PWF is successful is because I developed that, work ethic really young. But that's kind of like a side tangent.
Yeah, it is a side tangent.
Yeah, so the initial point was we're talking about what are the factors that I value. Why? Okay, you were saying that a 2-year-old who has more potential.
No. Let's just go back to because I think we're getting really off topic.
Yeah,
I want to return to the point of let's talk about, because what I'm trying to show you is that you don't actually value sentience. Sentience isn't really relevant. You're basically saying that sentience is really important to you when they're a fetus, but it's not so important to you later, right?
It is important, but there's other factors at play later on.
Okay,
but it doesn't change the fact that it's important. It's just there's no way you can be out of the womb and not be sentient aside from a coma.
Actually, there are multiple ways you can be. Like, you can be unconscious.
What does that mean? Like sleeping?
No, yeah, sleeping is one thing, but you could also be like, let's say that I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I could get choked unconscious. Oops.
Right, but you're only not sentient for like 30 seconds, and then you're sentient.
Why does that matter? I'm returning to consciousness just like a baby will return to consciousness once it's born.
I mean, I think there's a difference between 30 seconds and 8 months.
Why?
Why is there a difference?
Because they're both natural process. Why is time a qualifier?
Why does time play a role? I mean, I think that's like a completely different level of burden. You're a burden to who? The jiu-jitsu place for like 30 seconds. That's different than
burden. What kind of burden? Are we talking economic burden, moral burden? We're trying to look at.
Oh, you could be like, let's just assume that you got knocked unconscious for 9 months and you had to lay in the jiu-jitsu studio. We can't deny
that would be something.
Yeah, we can't deny that would be like a burden to that studio, because there's literally a fucking person laying there while they're trying to like teach their students. Like, I'm not saying that necessarily means we should like kill you, but that's a completely different level of burden than if you being knocked unconscious for 20, 30 seconds.
But what kind of burden? Like economic burden?
To the jiu-jitsu studio if you were there for 9 months?
Yeah, but yeah, is that what you're talking about?
You'd be an economic burden, you'd be a social burden, you'd be like literally every kind of burden. If you have to lay in the studio for 9 months.
Okay, but why are any of those things relevant to moral consideration?
Why are they relative to moral consideration? Because
we're talking about abortion here, right? So I'm saying that like it would be immoral to kill me when I'm unconscious on the jiu-jitsu mat, right? From purely a sentience perspective.
But I've acknowledged that sentience is not the only factor.
Like, okay, but is it the only factor when you're in the womb, and it's not later?
Is it the only factor when you're in the womb? I think that if we're going to draw the point somewhere, we should probably draw it before sentience. So yes, I do.
Wait,
there's a distinction between like a 1 month non-sentient fetus and like a 6 month sentient fetus. I do think there's a distinction there.
Okay, but why? I mean, we've already discussed that sentience doesn't matter.
No, sentience.
Why? So okay, wait. So sentience does matter in the womb. That's what you're saying, and it doesn't matter after. Is that what you're saying?
It does matter afterwards. It still matters afterwards, but there's no scenario with the exception of you being knocked out for 30 seconds
or sleeping or in a coma.
When you're in a coma, you're still sentient, dude. Like you can still.
You're not sentient, dude. I gave you that, and it's not even determined whether you can experience that. We already talked about how animals, like our ability to perceive feelings in general, right? That's what gives us sentience. It's the perception, and we don't know whether people in comas can perceive anything.
Right.
We know that their emotion centers activate.
Like sleep, if your girlfriend like fucking punches you or starts sucking your dick, you're gonna feel it and you're gonna wake up. Like you are clearly sentient when you're in a coma.
What? Sorry, if my girlfriend
sorry. You're sentient. I misspoke. You're sentient when you're sleeping.
No, you're not. What? I mean, like if you wake me up by like stimulating some part of my body, activating my nervous system, which wakes me up, then I'll start perceiving that I'm feeling pleasure. But I won't perceive the pleasure until I'm actually awake. You don't perceive the pleasure while you're sleeping.
Yeah, you will wake up immediately. Like your girlfriend starts sucking your dick, you'll wake up.
Yeah, you'll wake up and then you'll perceive the pleasure, presumably if she's good at blowjobs. But yeah.
Yeah. So how is that not sentient? Because
you're awake. You're sentient when you're awake, but you're not sentient when you're sleeping.
But that's completely different than a coma patient who cannot be woken up.
But that's not what I'm trying to illustrate. I'm trying to illustrate that sentience doesn't matter as a moral consideration. It doesn't matter whether you compare it to coma or to sleeping or getting knocked out or whatever you want to compare it to. The point is, sentience in general does not grant moral consideration. And there's no reason why, if it doesn't grant moral consideration once you're out of the womb, why does it grant moral consideration when you're in the room?
But I do think it grants moral consideration outside of the womb. Like, I do think that, like, I'm much more okay with, like, a coma patient who's not sentient being put to death than, like, I don't know, like someone who's alive. Like, yeah, like it definitely grants a major amount of consideration.
I'm sorry.
You're not like following me, but yeah. So I definitely think it grants a major amount of consideration, sentience, whether the whatever the thing has the ability. The human.
Okay, so let's say that I'm sleeping. Okay, do we agree that I don't have sentience while I'm sleeping, or do we not agree on that?
No, we don't agree on that.
Okay, so why am I sentient while I'm sleeping?
Why are you sentient? Because you still have the ability to perceive or feel things.
You don't. You have the ability to perceive or feel things when I wake up.
That feeling might be delayed by a split second, but it's still there.
The split second is when I wake up, when I go from the state of not being able to perceive to being able to perceive. That split second is hugely important because I change states. I'm no longer asleep.
I think if you can feel, like, let's just grant your point. Even though I think that it's not as clear cut as that. I think that, like, for example, if you, I don't know, you have like some audiobook playing, you're going to like, that's going to affect your, but anyway, so like, okay, let's just grant that point and assume there's like that split second delay. I think that's still negligible if you're going to be sentient in a split second. Like, that's a little different than being sentient in 9 months. Those two are not the same thing.
You're not going to be sentient in 9 months, though. You said yourself that you're going to be sentient in between 4 and 5 months.
Right. 3-4 months. Right. I think that's different than if you're sentient in a split second and you're sentient in, I don't know, 3 months. Let's just put it that.
But that also doesn't make any sense. Why you haven't explained why time is a qualifier? Why does time matter? So it's sentience under purview of time. Is that what you're arguing is a moral property then?
You can make the okay. Well, we can rephrase it to say it's sentience if it's you're going to be sentient in, like, I don't know, like a minute or two or something like that, or a day. I don't know where you want to draw that line, but something like that. Yeah, we can include that.
But Alex, will you acknowledge that this line, this time that you're drawing is completely arbitrary, right? You'll acknowledge that. Yeah. But so it doesn't make any sense.
Just because something is arbitrary doesn't mean it doesn't make sense.
Of course it does, because you need some reason to, like, when you qualify something as a moral property, you need some reason behind it. You can't just say, "Oh yeah, time is convenient to my position, so we'll just throw in time there." Like, do you know what I'm saying?
I mean, I think it's logical to think that you're still sentient if you can literally respond to that stimuli a split second later. Like, I think
Why?
that split second delay, you can make, if we're following this logic, then if we're following this logic, then actually none of us are sentient, because, for example, if you get punched, your brain doesn't register it until like 0.001 second later. So
no, that's not true. That's not true, because we both agreed on the definition of sentience as being able to perceive stuff. Yes,
right, but you don't perceive it. But I punch you, you don't perceive it until a split second later.
No, but I'm still able to perceive it once it arrives to my brain, even though it hasn't yet. Once it does, I am able. It's the ability to perceive.
You're also able to perceive it. It's going to take you a second longer. You're also
you
able.
Mean when you're asleep? Are you talking about asleep now?
Yeah, you're still
because while you're asleep, you aren't able to perceive.
Well, you are if you're going to wake up. If like you take 100 people who are sleeping, you punch them in the face, all 100 of them are going to wake up and they're going to feel it, right? So you are able to perceive it. Just the delay might be split second longer.
But they aren't able to feel it while they're asleep. That's the important distinguishing factor, Alex.
Right, but they're able to feel it like a split second later.
But that doesn't matter. We're talking about sentience.
To me, no different than your brain having a small delay when you get punched. Like that to me is just a difference in delay. Nothing is instantaneous. So whether
it's about sticking to our definitions. We agree that the definition of sentience is the ability to perceive stuff, the ability to perceive.
Right,
and while you're sleeping, you do not have that ability.
Well, we never said it was instantaneous. Ability. Okay, I'll amend the definition. Ability to perceive things in under 2 seconds. Here.
Why? That's completely. That's like a crazy qualifier that you're just adding to the definition, right?
I mean, well, yeah, you're kind of forcing me to add a qualifier to it, but I mean, I think that's like a reasonable standard that, like, I think 99.9% of people would agree that when you're sleeping, you're sentient, because if someone punches you, or you'll literally feel it a split second later, right? Which to me is not that different than someone who's awake, right? And who gets punched, who feels it maybe 0.01 second later, right? There's always a delay. And you have the ability to feel it because it's going to happen every time. That ability is there because it's going to happen 100 out of 100 times. If someone punches you, whatever, while you're sleeping, you're going to feel that if the punch is hard enough, right? So again, like that, I don't draw a distinction there at all. To me, that's like basically the same shit.
Okay, I mean, on this particular point, like if we can't acknowledge that, like adding qualifiers, like that completely changes the definition, because if you're saying that it's because what I could say in that case is that my qualifier for sentience, right, is the ability to like the potential ability to perceive things, right? That's my definition of sentience now. So I'm qualifying it, huh?
Well, the way you're defining is ability to perceive or feel things instantaneously.
No. At the time of discussion, like at the time, if we're making a framework and we're looking at an actual situation that's occurring. So a person is asleep, right? At that time, while they're asleep, before anything has happened, do they have the ability to perceive feelings? And the answer is no.
What does that mean? Do they have the ability? What do you mean by ability?
So at that time, at that exact moment, do they have the ability to consciously perceive something?
At that very exact moment, but that's not even if you're not asleep. It's not going to be.
But the thing is, like, if I amend the definition to something that suits my prerogative, so pro-life, right? And I could say that, okay, so actually, sentience is the potential ability to perceive.
But according to you, if, for example, so if there's like a split second delay, then that being is not sentient. So your definition of sentience is
no, that is not my definition of sentience.
So
but you are sentient, like you are sentient. If there's a delay, if at the time of the delay happening, so let's say you punch me or I punch you, whatever, right? At that time, even before the signal has reached your brain, are you able to perceive it or not?
Well, what does able mean? It's either like you're gonna perceive it or you're not gonna be able to perceive it. Does able mean the ability, the option of perceiving it, right?
So like, let's say that we have two punches that occur right after each other, right? Okay. So the first punch you've already registered, right? It's reached your brain, the nervous signal has activated in your brain, and you're, ow, that really hurts, right?
Yeah,
and then someone punches, huh?
Yeah, split second.
So at that time, you do have the ability to perceive, right? So you are sentient at that time. And then literally 1 second later, you get punched again. But this time, the signal hasn't reached your brain yet. But you are still able, even though it hasn't reached your brain yet, to perceive that signal.
Yes,
right?
and I would make that
you have the ability. And that qualifies sentience. Yes.
Yeah, and I would make that same argument about being asleep. You're still able to perceive it. It's just going to take a tad bit longer. That's all. You're still able to, because 100 out of 100 times, if you get punched while you're asleep, you're going to feel it, right? So you're still able to perceive it, right? It's not like, for example, I don't know, like let's say you get punched while you're sleeping. It's not like, for example, that like you're not going to form a bruise or something. You're still able to perceive it. You're still able to feel it. Just the delay is slightly longer. That's all. Same shit.
But it's not the same shit. It's not even close to the same shit, because while you're asleep, you do not at that time have the ability to perceive. We will go around in circles in this, and we will never agree. But can we just like acknowledge that? Okay, so let's say that we don't agree on the sleeping thing. Okay, that's fine. But do we agree on the coma thing?
What was the coma?
Do you have the ability to perceive while you're in a coma? Because that's really the only blow I need.
Well, I think like let's just assume I don't know enough about coma patients to know they can actually feel, but let's just assume that like
I can do a quick Google search on that if you want.
I'll just grant you the point. Let's just assume that they can't feel anything. So, are you sentient in that point? No, you're not sentient.
Okay, so then you lose strong moral qualification, right?
Yes, you have less moral qualification than someone who's sentient, who can feel and perceive things.
Okay, but there are also other factors at play, yes?
Yeah, I've acknowledged that. Yeah, there's other factors.
But those other factors don't influence a fetus in the womb. Correct.
I don't know what other factor could apply. I mean, maybe heartbeat. I think.
Why does heartbeat grant moral consideration?
I'm not saying it does. I'm just saying I don't know what other factors could qualify when you're a fetus.
But do you see how this is inherently contradictory? That like when you're out of the womb, you have other moral considerations that apply, and when you're in the womb, you only have one. Does that not seem contradictory to you?
No, because there's a whole bunch of things that can't apply because you haven't been born yet. You haven't come out of your mom's vagina yet. So
exactly.
So we can say potential, but these other things, like for example, the person who's in a coma, he might have a family or something like that. These things can't exist because you haven't been born yet.
Exactly. And that's why your position is inherently inconsistent. Because if you're saying that so there are only two positions you can take from that perspective. Either you have to argue that a human that has now been born is worthy of even more consideration, like moral consideration, once, let's say, it grows up. So it's 20 years old now. It does have social value. Now this being has more moral consideration than a baby in the womb. That's what you have to argue. Otherwise, the position collapses.
That's exactly what I've been saying the whole time. I think there's different levels.
Okay, so but that isn't your position, because you argued earlier that a 2-year-old also doesn't have any social value. So then you're saying that the 2-year-old also has less social value than the 20-year-old.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, no, sorry, I misspoke. Sorry, not social value. I mean moral consideration. Sorry, I misspoke.
Yeah, I think that what's it called? Would I say 20-year-old has more moral consideration than a 2-year-old? Yeah, yes. Probably because the 20-year-old has social value versus the 2-year-old has no social value. So yeah, I would say probably more social consideration.
So that means that you would be more okay with killing a 2-year-old than you would be with killing a 20-year-old. Do you acknowledge that point then? Because in my opinion, that's all I really need to show.
Would I be more okay with killing a 2-year-old than I would be with killing a 20-year-old? Mm-hmm. I mean, I would say both are wrong.
Of course.
Which one is?
I hope we can both agree on that.
Yeah, probably the 20-year-old if they're like a productive member of society because they're contributing something. They have social connections. So yeah, I would probably say it would be in some circumstances more wrong to kill the 20-year-old than kill a 2-year-old. But I certainly wouldn't be a fan of killing either.
Okay. I mean, again, this I don't really know how else to explain my point, but like this kind of just shows that like if this is your position, that you think that young people that don't have social value yet are worth less morally than people who have social value, that I think speaks a lot to your ideological position. That's really all I need to really say on the topic.
I mean, I think I've like not hid that at all. Yeah, I think there's like different. I've also acknowledged earlier in the previous debate that like someone who's like Elon Musk has a lot more moral value than someone who's like a heroin addict or something like that. Yeah, assuming they're both the same age. So yeah, I mean, I think that's like not a radical position that different people have different contribution or whatever to society. Yeah, like I would have no qualms admitting that like Elon Musk has more moral value than a heroin addict if they were the same age. Yeah.
Yeah, but in this case, we were talking about a 20-year-old like who has social value and a 2-year-old who doesn't have social value yet. You would still attribute higher social value to. Oh, sorry, not I'm saying social value again and again. I mean moral value. Sorry. Yeah, you would say.
What is moral value exactly to you?
So that's what I said at the beginning of the debate. I only value people based on their ability to respect my social contract. So if you can't reciprocate, like animals can't, because an animal would literally.
A 2-year-old can't respect your social contract either. He has no idea what the fuck is going on. He has the potential.
Yeah, but that's why I have rules, right? I have rule utilitarianism. I care about the rule. So generally speaking, people as a whole category, in order to achieve the best outcomes, will respect my social contract as a society. That's why it's a rule.
But if a 20-year-old is capable of respecting your social whatever contract and 2-year-old can't, then shouldn't a 20-year-old be prioritized?
No, because the rule applies universally to all members of society. Because categorizing, and also another angle you can take to this, if it's easier to understand, is the 2-year-old, in my view, can be seen as an extension of their family at that point, because they don't have technically, I guess, self-governance at that point. So like it's actually their parents' ability to respect my social contract, if that's an easier way to understand it. But actually the rule is all you need. Like the rule is that generally speaking, people in society will respect my social contract, and therefore I will respect their social contract. And that's what grants them more.
What if you know that at 2 years old, that kid is going to have autism and he's never going to be able to respect your social contract?
We go back to the rule. Because generally speaking, people in society as a whole will respect my social contract.
Right.
And that's why someone, if they're born with the genetic disposition of having autism that is beyond their fault, they still shouldn't be precluded from me respecting their social contract, because as a rule, because again, if I was in that position, let's say I was autistic, right? And I had that genetic disposition, which is very unfortunate, and I can't understand social contracts, I would still want my social contract to be respected, because I don't want to die. Like that would be in my best interests, generally speaking. So that's why it's a rule and not a specific example by example. That was kind of what I was trying to talk about.
Yeah, I'm just kind of confused by the logic there, because if like I'm just not following like how, okay, so if like the ability to respect your social contract is what matters, then following that train of thought, I understand that as a species, humans generally have the ability to respect social contracts, but that doesn't change the fact that a 2-year-old can't and a 20-year-old can. So like if that's what matters, then even though they're the same species, the 20-year-old should have some kind of more priority over the 2-year-old.
No, they shouldn't, because like I said, it's a rule. It's not an example it's not a specific example by example, because that would lead to absurd outcomes. If you think about it, right?
It's a rule, but right, okay. So
if you want, like explaining rule with utilitarianism to you is going to take like another hour probably. So if you want, I can refer you to the Stanford Dictionary of Philosophy, and you can read about it there. Because I promise you, this has been discussed by academics for years and years and years and years, and it is consistent, and it's very, very hard to like argue against. So if you want to argue against like mountains of literature, you can, but it's a very well established position within philosophy and moral ethics. So like that's
okay. I mean, maybe it is, maybe it's not, but it doesn't really seem to make much sense on the surface. Like if the thing like is social ability to respect your social autonomy, then there should be a difference.
No, not autonomy, contract.
A contract, yeah. Then there should be a difference in prioritization between a 20-year-old and 2-year-old, or between.
No, there shouldn't, because it's rules. Like I said,
right.
Because the rules applies equally to everybody in every scenario, because humans are inherently imperfect beings, unable to perceive what would grant the maximum amount of utility in every situation. So that's why you create general rules that apply to all members of society, so that you can have like essentially predictive outcomes of what will give you. So let's say that like let's say that like, have you played chess before?
Yeah, many times. Let me just get a drink 1 second. Yeah, I love chess.
Do you play competitively?
No, not competitively, but I know how to play.
Cool. Okay, so let's say that there would be a solution to chess. Like if I knew exactly what you were going to play, right? and I was prepared for the moves that you were going to play exactly, and then I would organize my opening play to counter yours specifically, right? That would be the ideal outcome, right, for me, because I would win in that chess game, correct?
Yes.
But I don't really know what you're going to play. So I am going to assume that you'll try to play your best and I'll try to play my best, and therefore I'll stick to what I perceive, or rather what the computer these days perceives to be the best opening lines, generally speaking. It's the same for rule utilitarianism. So basically, I will follow the same rules for everyone because they predict the, generally speaking, most, I guess, preferable outcomes based on like utility, essentially. And utility being well-being, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I mean, but to me, there's like a little bit of I think there's a little bit of a confusion between macro and micro, right? So yeah, macro level for sure, as a human species, this rule makes sense. But on a micro level, if we're comparing the life of a 2-year-old and 20-year-old, it doesn't really make sense. So I guess you're saying that this rule only applies to the macro and not the micro?
Yes, exactly. Because on a micro, if you dissect something by micro situation by micro situation, because the nature of a human species is not being perfect information, we can't predict the best outcomes. So
yeah,
even on the micro scale, Alex. So even on the micro scale, because you don't have perfect information, right? In most instances, the trying to maximize utility by personally perceiving all the circumstances individually is going to, generally speaking, have worse outcomes in the long run than following the same principles over and over and over. So even if you could come up with one specific example where maybe departing from my rule, like in your example, in the 2-year-old and 20-year-old, would be preferable in that specific instance, that would significantly decrease the effectiveness of the overall system because in the long run, that would lead to worse outcomes. Again, this is bunch of studied philosophy, but yeah, that's my best explanation of it. Not a philosopher. I did 1 year of philosophy in at a university, but that's basically the limit of my explaining abilities, I think.
Yeah, so if you can have a separation between macro and micro, I think that my position becomes pretty reasonable. Where I think, generally speaking, on a macro level, you shouldn't kill anybody, right? It's generally we ought not to kill people, but on a micro level, if I have a gun to my head and I'm forced to choose between, I don't know, what was the analogy you gave between a 2-year-old and a 20-year-old, and I pick the 20-year-old, I don't see that as any different than you not choosing, because again,
yes, it actually is very different, because the reason why I make my rules is because in the long run, even on the micro scale, situation by situation by situation, it will have inevitably better outcomes than your version. So
I can make this same argument on a macro level. On what's it called?
We're talking micro by micro now, by the way. Just yeah.
Okay. Okay, you're losing me. We're talking.
Okay. So like, do you agree that humans don't have access to perfect information, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So if we have situations that happen, like we have loads of moral situations that happen every day, if you think about it, like you can choose to cheat on your significant other, you have loads of moral dilemmas all the time that come up in your day-to-day life, right? And trying to figure out which, and some are harder than others. So you can choose to like help your mom with something or your significant other, like, and then you have to determine in your brain what will maximize utility, right? Or maximize well-being.
All right.
But determining this for a non-perfect information being is almost impossible. That's why even on the micro scale, if you follow rules, you will generally, over a lot of small micro instances, end up with a better long-term outcome than if you try to specify everything example by example. So yeah, do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I would make the argument that even on a micro level, if we have to, when the mother, okay, we're talking about this from the perspective of a policymaker, right? So we don't, so I guess the macro affects the micro, but like, okay, I don't know which point to take it from. Let's just take from the mother's perspective. You don't know if maybe that baby will be like the greatest joy to her life, but generally speaking, if she has to make that choice and she aborts the baby, like that's, like, yeah, like I don't understand how the logic applies for one doesn't apply for the other. Like I don't understand how that invalidates my argument in any way.
No, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I just fell out for a second.
Yeah, I'm just confused. Okay, I guess like let me phrase it like this. I just confused how this how this argument that you made invalidates my argument in any way. To me, it just seems like a different perspective where you think that the species of humans has the same level of intrinsic value because as a species, we have the potential to, I guess,
respect social contracts. Exactly. So if you notice, my moral system stays consistent. So I will determine that, like, from a moral perspective, like I said, practically you can't ban abortion. It's impossible. It literally is a disaster. That was the first thing I said. But from a moral perspective, my system stays consistent internally the whole way through. I only care about the potential to respect social contracts throughout the entire process. I don't care about anything else. I don't care about social value. I don't care about.
But you only care about it as a species. You don't care about it as a person.
I care about it as a species because, like I said, that will predict the best outcomes in the long run.
That will predict the best outcomes in the long run. But let's say in a hypothetical, you have to choose, like, because you gave me a bunch of, like, hypotheticals. So let me give you one. You have to choose. You are the person who makes the decision. You have to choose between a 2-year-old autistic child who will never respect social contracts, severe autism, and a 2-year-old child who is totally normal, right? Like, which one would you pick?
I would flip a coin.
What?
I would flip a coin.
You would flip a coin?
Yeah.
But one has the ability to respect social contracts and one doesn't.
But I don't care because I follow rules. I don't care about specific instances. That's the whole point of my system. If I departed from that, I would be incredibly inconsistent and my logic would fall in on itself. It would be paradoxical.
But you don't think if you're in, like, this hypothetical situation that the main thing is respect of social contracts, it would make more sense to pick the person who's not autistic?
No, because, like I said, I care about the rule. I don't care about the specific instance. Like, you aren't going to get me to depart from this. This is the foundation for your rule utilitarianism. Fuck, I can't even pronounce it. Rule utilitarianism. Yeah, there we go.
Would you care more about? Okay, so I guess this comes down to pragmatism versus idealism. So you care more about the ideal rule versus the pragmatic.
Yes, because the ideal rule will predict better outcomes in the long run than yours.
But we're talking in this specific scenario where you have the information, right? Like,
if I have a perfect,
be idealistic to the rule, then yes, you should flip a coin. But if you want to be pragmatic in your goal of I don't know, having more humans that respect social value, then you should pick the non-autistic person.
No, because well, the thing is, in your example, if I have perfect information, right, which is complete, like, which is separate from reality, and if my ideal is to maximize welfare as a general concept, then yes, it would be better for me to prioritize the person with the ability to respect social contracts. But the problem with that is that it doesn't really translate to real life because it's not perfect information, and it doesn't, like, each instance doesn't work like you were suggesting.
I can make that same argument for every analogy you gave me.
What?
I can make that same argument for every analogy you gave me. Like,
no, you can't, because I showed you the disqualifying factor. You didn't show me any disqualifying factors with any of my analogies earlier. Your disqualifying factor with your analogy is the fact that in your instance, it's perfect information. You know exactly which will garner the most social value and with the greatest ability to respect my social contracts. And that just isn't the case in real life. Like, we don't know that, like, long term picking the person that like perceivably has the ability to respect social contracts. What if that person grows up, has a traumatic incident, and turns into a sociopath, and then kills a bunch of people? Let's say that, and the autistic kid is just quiet and sits in his room and doesn't do anything. Let's say, for the sake of argument, this is why perfect information doesn't apply to real life. My examples absolutely do apply to real life. They just isolate the variable of sentience and show why it's not translatable to every instance.
How do they apply? Well, again, my argument isn't sentience the only thing that matters, but how do they apply? Like, none of those situations involve having perfect information. Like, with the guy in the coma, we don't know if he's going to wake up in 1 minute, 1 year, or never. Like, we never have perfect.
That doesn't matter, because perfect information is a necessity for your ideology in terms of countering mine, but it's not a necessity for mine. You understand? So when I'm isolating sentience as a variable, I don't need perfect information, because perfect information isn't a prerequisite for sentience. But perfect information is a prerequisite for valuing a person with the ability to respect social contracts over another person. Because, as I showed with my example, that person who perceivably can respect social contracts might grow up, have a traumatic accident, and suddenly just kill a bunch of people. That might happen. But for a person who's in a coma, they just have no sentience, and that's the end of that line.
Well, when we make public policy, we don't do it based on perfect information. We do it on probabilities and odds, usually or ideally. So, I mean, like, it's never based on perfect information. It's always based on probabilities. So I think probabilities is a reasonable standard.
Probabilities? Yeah, exactly.
When we make public policy, we never have perfect information. We do it on probabilities and odds, right? That's typically how public policy is made. So I think that's like reasonable for me to make standards based on probabilities and odds.
You might say that, but just as a joke, I feel like American public policy is mostly based on the coin flip.
I kind of would probably even agree with that to some extent.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, that's the idea behind making public policies. You never have.
No, I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that, and that's why when we're making public policy in the practical dimension, like I was talking about, pro-choice is the only option, because like we saw in Colombia, banning and overturning Roe versus Wade from a practical perspective is a disaster. But from a moral perspective, I think pro-life is a very defensible position. It depends on what. Yeah.
So what do you think? Do you think?
Oh crap! Sorry, I lost my headphones.
Oh, okay, so I guess the ultimate question is, what do you think? Do you think we should overturn Roe versus Wade or no?
As a whole, I think I would agree with you. I think the practical just outweighs in the end.
Okay. Oh, okay, so we're largely in agreement about the end goal. We're just
of course. I listened to the debate yesterday, and I thought it was very entertaining. And I was like, I feel like a lot of pro-life people are very, very inconsistent with their arguments. And from a moral perspective, I think it's very interesting to have these debates. And like we agreed earlier, I think that primarily the decision to overturn Roe versus Wade wasn't a public policy interest. It was actually an ethical interest. It was a conservative ideal, a value judgment, and that's why I was kind of interested in debating the moral properties. I guess.
But we agree on the end goal. We just disagree on the means to get there.
Yes, I would concur with that statement.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, this was super enjoyable, Alex. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on.
Cool. I'll see you later. Bye.
Take care. I mean, it was interesting. I mean, I think I would say that I don't really care how we get there, as long as we get to the same point. Like, I don't really care what logic we use to get there. Like, I don't really care why the girl fucks me, as long as she fucks me. So, but I'm very much a pragmatist. Okay, that was interesting, because I thought the whole time he was like a pro-life, but ultimately he's like pro-choice. He just disagrees with the way I got there. Yeah, that was interesting. I'm kind of mind fucked. We've been going for like 3 hours, guys. I think we got to call it. I know there's a whole bunch of people who want to come on. I feel bad, but yeah, we've been going for 3 hours. My brain is fried. But that was very interesting set of conversations. I mean, the challenge level was definitely the last guy was definitely quite solid. I know some people are getting like super triggered in the comments. I don't know why. This shouldn't be like that fucking deep. It's just a debate at the end of the day. But yeah, I was just kind of like low-key watching the chat as this was going. Like, some of the stuff I see is pretty funny. Alex has said before that he's not big ethics, so when somebody has high ethic, goes after him, it rolls off, and the person making his point sound emotional. I do have strict personal ethics. I just don't think that my ethics should apply to public policy. Like I said, I think lying is really messed up, but I don't think there should be a law against lying. So, so I do have strong ethics. I just don't think they should be reflective of public policy. But there was one comment I wanted to address, but I guess I kind of missed it. Anyway, this was definitely a very interesting discussion. I think that I feel bad for all the people who want to get on. And there's one guy, J-Mont, I know I told you I was going to have on, but we're 3 hours in, man. My brain is like fucking fried. I think if I debate now, I'm going to be arguing at like 1% brain capacity. I could only do debates for like 2.5 hours. I can't do it for much longer. Okay, Brad is like, have me on as the last one real quick. Will be a great wrap up to the show. But that would be so unfair to the other guys who are waiting, because I already had you on. I mean, I did want to say, Brad, I know you watch a lot of live streams, so I did want to end it off on a positive note and be like, yo, man, I appreciate all your support before your phone died. That's like literally the last thing I was going to say. But yeah, I think we got to call it. It's 3 hours in, 3 hours and 12 minutes in. And if I have you on a second time, it wouldn't be fair to the people who've been waiting. Yeah, I'm sorry for everyone. Like, the one thing I do feel bad about is all the people who are waiting backstage who I didn't get a chance to get to. I really have like no regrets about any of my arguments that I've made. I know people are saying like, "Oh, Alex doesn't care about 2-year-olds." Like, it's misinterpreting my argument. I just think that a 20-year-old probably has more value than a 2-year-old, probably, but I wouldn't kill either of them. But anyway, so yeah, but no, I don't feel bad about anything I said. The only thing I do feel bad about is all the people who had to wait backstage who thought they were going to get to come on, but didn't get to. I'm sorry. Alex, I feel like I like you, but I feel it's personal agenda. If you have a kid with another chick, it affects you a lot. Yeah, I have no dog in this fight. First of all, I don't even think I'm capable of having kids because of all the testosterone shit I'm on. Like, I've never had a pregnancy scare in my life, so I don't think this affects me at all. I have no dog in this fight. I really could care less. Like, it doesn't affect me in any way. This is purely intellectual exercise for me. Yeah, I really just don't care. Like, I'm not a woman. I don't think I'm even capable of having children, at least not while I'm on testosterone. So yeah, there's really no personal agenda here, guys. I could care less about this issue from like a personal perspective. It's more just like an intellectual exercise. I much more care about like legalizing weed because then I could like buy weed down the street instead of having to have it like shipped in and shit like that, or deal with drug dealers. Like, that's an issue that affects me personally. This one is not an issue that affects me personally. As a side note, I don't really care about like universal healthcare either because I have money and I can pay what's it called out of pocket for all medical expenses, which is what I've been doing. So yeah, like that one is not one I'm like super passionate about either. It's all an intellectual exercise. It's not like something I have a bias in. All right, cool guys. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks everyone who stayed through. That's if you stayed through this whole 3.5 hour thing, then you're a G. All right, guys, we're gonna probably do a podcast with the guys either tomorrow or Monday, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, this is we're not gonna get too derailed by the political stuff. I thought it would be fun to do given the nature of this topic. If I can get some like big time YouTuber to come on and debate me on this, I will. I think that's probably gonna be it on the Roe versus Wade thing. I think we beat this horse to death over and over again. All right, guys, peace.